The silence in the small town of Goshen, surrounded by orchards, was shattered when police officers discovered a lifeless man on the bathroom floor, Daniel Green. On February 6, 2015, at noon, his colleagues became concerned when he didn't arrive for his shift and went to check on him. What they found was shocking. Daniel, just 31 years old, had been shot 4 times, with 1 bullet striking his forehead. Neighbors reported not hearing anything unusual. There were no clues to identify the shooter. There was no weapon, no DNA evidence. It seemed the perpetrator had meticulously covered their tracks. Daniel Green spent his entire life in Goshen. He worked for 11 years in the California Police Department and earned the respect of the town's residents. Passionate about his job, he always wanted to make a positive impact on the community, where everyone knew and trusted each other. Tragically, it was here that his life came to a sudden and harsh end. The police launched their investigation, quickly turning their attention to Daniel's personal life. Since his divorce from 27-year-old Erica Sandoval, he had been living alone. Their relationship was complicated. Even after separating, Erica continued to meddle in Daniel's life, trying to control him despite their official split. On February 6, 2015, Erica showed up at the scene shortly after receiving a message from a friend. She entered the house, crying uncontrollably in front of the officers. She claimed that she hadn't seen Daniel that day and was not involved in the incident. However, her actions raised red flags for the investigators. She arrived too quickly, displayed excessive emotion, and there were many unanswered questions surrounding her involvement. The death of Officer Green impacted the Tulare County Sheriff's Department profoundly. His colleagues began to question whether his tragic end was connected to his work or if it stemmed from personal issues. As the questions multiplied, one thing became clear: these mysteries needed to be resolved quickly. Investigators meticulously examined motives, connections, and personal conflicts, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. Matt and Misty, Daniel's twin siblings, were deeply affected by their brother's loss. They grew up in Porterville, a small town in California, where they shared a dream of working in law enforcement. Matt initially joined the police force but later shifted to a career in law. In contrast, Daniel remained dedicated to his role in law enforcement, advancing to the position of officer and taking pride in his chosen path. Their sister consistently supported them and felt proud of her brothers. Daniel Green was known for both his career in the police force and his love for motorcycles. He was a member of a motorcycle club, where he enjoyed the thrill of riding and the feeling of freedom it provided. A close friend of his, James, often joined him on rides through the countryside, cherishing those moments on the road together. Daniel's personal life was quite active. He enjoyed dating and rarely spent time alone. For a while, he would frequently arrive at family events with different girlfriends each month. This pattern continued until late 2009 when he met Erica Sandoval, a 22-year-old nurse. Meeting Erica changed his life completely. He fell deeply in love and decided to take a step towards settling down. At that point, both of his siblings were already married, while he had been single. However, with Erica, it felt different. Daniel was truly captivated by her. A close friend of Erica revealed that Erica was very much in love with Daniel at the start of their relationship. Their connection was strong, and they initially appeared to be the perfect couple. However, Daniel's sister observed that although Erica was generally friendly, she could quickly become upset if things didn't go as she wanted. As time went on, stress accumulated in their relationship, leading to regular conflicts and arguments. Erica grew up in Southern California in a middle-class family. She had a brother who recalled that Erica, as their parents' only daughter, always felt special. Her parents pampered her, striving to provide her with the best of everything. As a result, Erica never faced hardship or mistreatment. She came to expect that her wishes would be met without hesitation. With the constant support and attention from her parents and brother, she developed a sense of entitlement and believed she deserved special treatment. Daniel Green, 26, and Erica Sandoval, 23, shocked their family and friends by secretly getting married in Las Vegas. They didn't inform anyone beforehand. Daniel's brother and sister were taken aback when they received a late-night message that included a photo of the marriage certificate. A few weeks later, the couple hosted a small celebration for their close friends, where Erica wore a white dress and Daniel donned a black suit. Despite seeming happy, Daniel and Erica's relationship was not perfect. A friend and fellow motorcyclist of Daniel's recalled that even before they got married, they had a serious fight where Erica used a razor to damage the furniture in Daniel's home. His friend considered this a troubling sign that should not have been overlooked. Daniel's brother, Matt, also saw the damage firsthand and was worried, but Daniel dismissed it as just an emotional outburst. Tensions continued within the family. During one argument, Matt and their sister heard Erica shouting at Daniel from another room and saw him break down in tears. Matt described it as one of the most painful moments of his life, feeling devastated to hear his brother cry. Intervening in Daniel and Erica's relationship was challenging. The Green family faced tough times growing up. Daniel's brother and sister recalled how they, along with their mother, suffered from their stepfather's abuse. He had a criminal background, drank heavily, and used banned substance. To shield their younger sister, Matt and Daniel, being older, often took the worst of the abuse. Eventually, their mother obtained a restraining order, and shortly after, their stepfather died. These experiences deeply affected each of them. Daniel's relationship with Erica mirrored the troubling dynamics of his childhood. Family members observed that Erica exerted control over Daniel, isolating him from friends and family while also belittling him verbally. Even though Daniel was a police officer who frequently dealt with victims of domestic abuse, he struggled to acknowledge that he was in a similar situation. He realized he was becoming a victim but felt powerless to change his circumstances due to fear, shame, and a reluctance to admit weakness. Just like women, many men often do not report domestic abuse for these same reasons. The problems in Daniel and Erica's marriage escalated in February 2011 when a neighbor witnessed a heated argument between them. Erica was shouting and provoking Daniel, pushing him to his limits. He tried to maintain his composure, aware that losing control could jeopardize his career. In a moment of desperation, he asked the neighbor to call emergency services to intervene. The police arrested Erica, but despite the seriousness of the situation, Daniel chose not to press charges, resulting in her quick release. This incident marked a turning point for Daniel, leading him to decide that their relationship was over. In January 2012, just a year after their official marriage, they divorced and separated. A few months later, Erica informed her friends that she was pregnant with Daniel's child. The news reached Daniel, and despite their past issues, he decided to give their relationship another chance for the sake of the unborn baby. They got back together, moved in again. Daniel's family hoped that this time would be different, that their conflicts would be resolved. He made an effort to keep the peace at home and looked forward to the baby's arrival. However, the issues persisted. Erica frequently confided in her friend about Daniel's harsh behavior. She described Daniel as cold and indifferent, expressing her unhappiness in the relationship. Her friend recalled Erica saying that Daniel had once grabbed her by the neck and attempted to choke her, which made Erica fear a tragic outcome. Daniel's relatives and friends described Erica as having aggressive behavior. She damaged furniture by slashing mattresses and sofas, which exemplified her lack of control. Their conflicts grew worse each month, yet neither side reached out for assistance. The relationship remained unstable, leading to increased tension. Despite attempts to maintain family unity, Daniel and Erica lived in a state of constant stress. Friends and family observed that their relationship had turned into a harmful cycle where both individuals were suffering, but neither was willing to make changes. They kept their issues hidden, avoided seeking help, resulting in a pattern of mutual blame and pain. On January 5, 2013, Erica gave birth to a son whom they named Aiden. At that moment, their relationship seemed to finally be improving. Daniel was thrilled to become a father and felt that his life had new meaning. For the sake of his family, he decided to sell his motorcycle, understanding that the safety and well-being of his loved ones were more important. This decision was not easy for him, but he did it for Aiden and for the stability of their family. Daniel posted pictures with his son on social media, capturing moments of joy and his happy life. However, just 6 months later, the tension started building again. The constant conflicts, arguments became more frequent. Daniel suggested that Erica move out, and she agreed, but she took Aiden with her, completely cut off contact with her ex-husband. Unable to see his son, Daniel fell into a deep depression. He decided to fight for custody of Aiden, which led to the start of a serious conflict between them. These events took place alongside another significant incident in Daniel's life. Just before Aiden was born, Daniel was on a motorcycle ride with a friend when his brakes suddenly failed. They stopped to check, and Daniel found that some wires had been cut. He immediately suspected Erica might be involved. When he got home, he confronted her, but she denied any wrongdoing and claimed she would never endanger his life. Erica disapproved of his motorcycle riding, seeing it as dangerous. Their arguments increased after the brake incident, creating more tension in their relationship. Daniel chose not to involve the police and kept the incident to himself to avoid drawing escalating conflicts. He recognized that their situation was becoming unhealthy, but he decided to stay silent in hopes of managing the fallout. After selling the motorcycle and welcoming the birth of his son, Daniel hoped for a calmer period in their family life. However, conflicts and tensions persisted. In the fall of 2014, during another night spent together, Daniel experienced a frightening incident that shook him deeply. In the middle of the night, he suddenly woke up to find Erica standing over him with a gun. She pointed it at him, claimed she had a nightmare in which he had been unfaithful. Erica expressed her desire to end his life to escape the pain of betrayal. Daniel calmed her down by reassuring her that it was just a dream and that he had always been faithful. After she lowered the gun, Daniel realized how dangerous their relationship had become. He shared the incident with his friends and concluded that it was time to end the toxic relationship for good. In January 2015, despite previous conflicts, Daniel and Erica came together to celebrate their son Aiden's second birthday with close family. During the gathering, they appeared to be friendly, leading some to speculate that they might be rekindling their relationship. However, Daniel was aware that a future with Erica was not feasible and wanted to avoid their past disagreements. Following the celebration, Daniel informed his friends about his new girlfriend, a 20-year-old named Brenda Vela, and shared a photo of them on social media, revealing his happiness. Many people were optimistic that he was starting a more peaceful chapter in his life. Erica and Daniel's relationship had been marred by conflict, mutual blame. Their text messages were filled with hostility, including hundreds containing anger and insults. Daniel accused Erica of trying to take his son away from him, while Erica accused him of being selfish and unfit father. Their arguments covered topics from parenting to personal attacks. There was no constructive communication, only increasing tension. On the morning of February 6, 2015, Daniel dropped Aiden off at Erica's house as planned and then went to the gym. After working out, he returned home, where a tragic event occurred. Daniel entered the bathroom, sat down, and was shot 4 times in the arm, chest, neck, and forehead. He died instantly, with no chance to protect himself. The day after Daniel's death, Erica was brought in for questioning. She insisted she hadn't visited his house in weeks and had no connection to what had happened. Investigators, however, told her they had surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera showing her entering the house on the day of the incident. Although the video did not clearly identify her, the investigators used this information to pressure her. The tactic worked. Overwhelmed, Erica confessed and even revealed where she had disposed of the firearm involved in the crime. The prosecutor claimed that jealousy and a fear of being replaced by another woman motivated the crime. When Erica was arrested, police discovered a note in her purse with Brenda's name and birth year, suggesting Erica had been monitoring Daniel's new girlfriend. The evidence against her was strong, but the trial didn't begin until October 1, 2019, 5 years after the incident. Erica made about 170 phone calls to Daniel in an effort to reconnect after she found out that he had introduced their son, Aiden, to Brenda and that they were spending time together. This prompted Erica to lose control. The prosecutor also mentioned that after the crime, Erica deleted several messages from Daniel's phone where she had tried to persuade him to believe she would change and improve. However, Daniel made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. He intended to move forward with his life. During the trial, Erica's lawyer argued that Daniel had been an abusive husband who repeatedly attacked her. They presented audio recordings of their intense arguments, where Daniel could be heard insulting and threatening Erica. These recordings were vital to her defense, highlighting the aggression and cruelty in their relationship. In court, Erica detailed the abuse she suffered over the years. She stated that Daniel physically assaulted her, choked her, and made threats against her. Erica explained that she lived in constant fear and refrained from reporting the abuse to the police because she felt it would be pointless. She believed that, as a police officer, Daniel could sway any investigation and that he was too powerful for her to seek justice. Erica also thought that people would not believe her because Daniel was well respected in their community. On February 5, 2015, the day before the incident, Erica said she had a phone conversation with Daniel. During their conversation, they flirted, which gave her hope of rebuilding their relationship. The following day, she decided to visit his house to see if they could reconnect. Upon entering, she noticed 2 firearms on the table, which made her feel uneasy. Curious, Erica explored the house further and discovered a partially open safe in one of the rooms. Inside the safe, she found 2 intimate photos of individuals who she believed looked underage. This discovery shocked her and made her worried that Daniel could be a danger to their son. Erica said that seeing the photos changed how she viewed Daniel. She recalled how he had made her wear school uniforms and started to realize that his interests might be more sinister than she had assumed. After putting the documents away, Erica heard a car pull up. It was Daniel. In a panic, she grabbed 2 loaded guns and hid in one of the rooms, unsure of what to do next. When Daniel entered the house, he moved through the rooms. Erica heard him go to the bathroom, and with the guns in her hands, she followed him, filled with fear. When she entered the bathroom, she found Daniel sitting on the toilet. He saw her and shouted angrily, threatening her. At that moment, she claimed she started shooting. She couldn't remember how many shots she fired but kept shooting until she felt safe. Then she ran out of the house, disposed of the guns, and attempted to escape. Erica revealed that she continued to have an intimate relationship with Daniel despite his mistreatment because she was afraid of how he would react if she refused him. She believed that not meeting his needs would lead to his aggression. This fear was a significant reason for her staying with him. She felt that her safety depended on obeying his demands. During the trial, Erica spoke for the first time about finding photos in Daniel's safe. She explained that she had kept this information to herself during the investigation because she did not trust the authorities and thought they would side with her ex-husband. Daniel's family was shocked by her allegations and completely rejected them. Erica maintained that she was scared her concerns would be overlooked or misunderstood. However, her claims were not backed up by evidence. Officers who searched Daniel's home found no illegal photos or proof to support her accusations. The prosecutor argued that Erica's statements were false, intended to evade accountability. Erica's lawyer attempted to paint Daniel negatively by highlighting that his phone and computer had hundreds of explicit photos and videos featuring adults. Additionally, the lawyer mentioned that Daniel had deleted over 1,000 images from his phone years ago, suggesting that this could imply he had troubling secrets. Erica may have had valid reasons to be afraid of him. She expressed sorrow for her actions and apologized to Daniel's family, stating that she never intended for things to end so tragically, that her actions were motivated by panic and fear for her son. Erica's attorney argued that the responsibility for Daniel's death was not only on Erica but also on Daniel himself. They were caught in a traumatic relationship that neither could escape, leading to a tragic outcome. The jury deliberated for nearly 4 days but couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, resulting in a mistrial. Erica's attorney viewed this as a positive outcome, as it allowed them to reevaluate the case and plan a new defense strategy. Nevertheless, Erica lost her parental rights, Daniel's brother, Matt Green, and his wife adopted Aiden. Erica Sandoval's first trial in 2019 ended with a hung jury. The next trial begins on February 6, 2025, exactly 10 years to the day after the crime was committed. Jury deliberations began on Tuesday, May 6, 2025. On May 8, 2025, Derica was found guilty of first-degree murder with the special allegation that she personally and intentionally discharged a firearm, causing serious bodily injury to Daniel. Sandoval's sentencing is scheduled for June 5, 2025. The trial is taking place in Room 20 at the Southern County Judicial Center in Porterville, where Sandoval faces 50 years to life in prison. Specifically as follows: she could be sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder charge and an additional 25 years to life for the weapons charge. Sandoval has served 10 years and may be eligible for an elder parole hearing when she has served 20 consecutive years and reached the age of 50. This tragedy has highlighted the destructive potential of jealousy and personal struggles when individuals don't seek help or end toxic relationships in a timely manner. Many lives have been shattered, causing immense pain and leaving many things unsaid. Nevertheless, there are still people who are fighting for a better future, striving for Aiden's happiness. While the story may have reached its conclusion, its impact will linger, reminding us of the hidden struggles that can exist behind the facades of seemingly perfect homes. The street was calm and peaceful late at night. Suddenly, the calm was broken by a noise. What happened next was shockingly violent and seemed carefully planned. The most troubling part was that she had warned others about the possibility of this event, but no one intervened. Alessandra Mattuzzi was born and raised in Italy and spent most of her life in the fashion industry. At 56, she worked as a sales representative for a boutique specializing in women's clothing. Those who knew her well described her as reliable, thoughtful, and elegant. She approached every task with precision and grace, whether assisting a customer or caring for a loved one. Alessandra was particularly known for her deep compassion. Her sense of duty went beyond her job. She had been her father's main caregiver during his final illness, providing unwavering support until his death. This experience left her emotionally exhausted. Afterward, she became withdrawn, avoiding social interactions and hesitating to form new relationships. Alessandra's daily life centered around her mother, who lived in a care home and needed constant care. She followed a regular routine that included frequent visits to her mother and daily phone calls with her younger sister, Stefania, with whom she had a strong bond. Although Alessandra was reserved, she maintained an online presence that showcased her life. Her social media accounts featured images of family gatherings, stylish work outfits, and quiet moments with her pet. She preferred calm environments and meaningful relationships over large social events. Everything changed in the summer of 2021 when she encountered a young man named Giovanni Padovani on social media. Giovanni, aged 27, was originally from Sicily. He lived an active lifestyle as a professional football player and part-time model. His social media was lively and well-followed, showcasing training sessions, travel adventures, and insights into photo shoots. His online persona was polished and charismatic, earning him admiration from many, particularly women. His friendly, approachable demeanor suggested he was both confident and down-to-earth. Despite their age difference, Alessandra and Giovanni connected easily from the start. Giovanni was respectful and kind, showing no signs of arrogance. As time went on, their messages became more frequent, transitioning from simple greetings to deeper conversations about their lives and feelings. Their digital exchanges developed into genuine emotional connections, and they began communicating almost daily. They sharing photos, life updates, and words of support. Eventually, Giovanni planned a visit to Alessandra in Bologna, where she lived. During his visit, he took the time to understand her world without being intrusive. One gesture that stood out was his offer to visit Alessandra's mother at the care home. This thoughtful act left a lasting impression, showing that he cared not only about Alessandra but also about the life she had built and the people she cherished. In the months that followed, Giovanni kept visiting Bologna. He and Alessandra spent peaceful moments together, walking around the city, cooking, and doing errands. He joined her in her daily activities and seemed to appreciate the slower pace of her life. He appeared to genuinely care for her, capturing their moments together in photos he occasionally shared online. In private messages, he expressed his support and affection for her. To onlookers, their relationship might have seemed surprising yet meaningful, as two very different lives came together. Shortly after the new year, the sense of security began to fade. Giovanni's behavior changed. He started calling more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day, and his questions became highly specific. What had once seemed like affectionate curiosity turned into suspicion. He wanted to know who she was talking to, what she was doing, and why. Their conversations morphed into interrogations filled with doubt. Then, he began accusing her of hiding things. There was no basis for his claims. His obsession extended beyond Alessandra. He started calling Stefania directly, trying to persuade her to adopt his distorted perspective. While he initially sought her support, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. His tone shifted from persuasive to aggressive. Stefania remembered how he used to yell during phone calls, his voice loud and full of accusations. Eventually, she cut all contact with him. In contrast, Alessandra chose to stay connected, believing that the difficult times would eventually pass. She tried to avoid arguments and calm the situation down in hopes of restoring balance. However, the man who had once seemed emotionally understanding became more controlling. His jealousy took hold, and even minor social media interactions, likes, photos, comments, sparked new conflicts. He demanded explanations for every little thing. As his obsession grew, so did his need for control. He began calling her at all hours of the night, and his messages shifted from sweet to overwhelming, and often filled with frustration or regret. Alessandra's sense of peace was shattered. His unpredictable moods drained her, and his expectations were unrealistic. Yet, he continued to intrude into her life in increasingly invasive ways. In early 2022, the situation worsened for Alessandra. After one of her visits, she discovered she was locked out of her email and social media accounts. When she tried to recover them, she found that the new passwords contained clues and references linked to Giovanni, making her suspect he had accessed her computer. The more she investigated, the more alarming things became. Her WhatsApp account was connected to a foreign device, and spyware was later found on her phone. This spyware allowed Giovanni not only to monitor her but also to read her messages, check her call logs, track her location in real time. His surveillance was intentional and methodical. Alessandra's suspicions were confirmed when Giovanni started mentioning private conversations she had never disclosed to him. He was aware of who she had communicated with and when. He challenged her with distorted interpretations of her online interactions, convinced she was being unfaithful despite having no evidence. His delusions intensified, and he demanded constant proof of her location, short videos every 10 minutes showing where she was and who she was with. When Alessandra refused to comply, he erupted in anger, threatening to end their relationship, accuse her of betrayal, or overwhelm her with messages until she complied. His demeanor became cold, controlling. Alessandra felt she was no longer an equal partner in the relationship. Instead, she felt watched, judged, and trapped. Giovanni's actions took a terrifying turn when he gained access to Alessandra's home surveillance system. He even sent a screenshot of her inside her apartment to her, revealing he had been watching her in what she thought was a safe space. By mid-2022, Giovanni's behavior became overtly predatory. He not only monitored her online but also started to follow her in person. He loitered around her apartment building in Bologna, appearing at strange hours without any notice. Neighbors began to take notice. One saw him attempting to enter the building, while another spotted him on the roof. He was no longer attempting to conceal his intentions. Her life became dominated by anxiety. Giovanni had become unpredictable and dangerous. The damage began to escalate. Someone tampered with her car, cutting its wiring and disabling the lights. In her apartment, the power was cut when someone removed the fuses. These incidents were more than just vandalism, they were deliberate attempts to force her to confront him. She heard shouting, loud bangs against her walls, and items being smashed in her home. At one point, he even climbed back onto the roof, trying to break in again. What had once seemed like affection had turned into obsession. All personal boundaries had been shattered. Alessandra, who once led a calm, structured life filled with routine, was now living in a constant state of fear. Alessandra was no longer in a relationship. She felt as though she was being hunted. She started carrying pepper spray. This small change marked a significant emotional shift for someone who once felt confident and graceful. Fear began to permeate her daily life. She confided in friends and family that returning home made her anxious. Sometimes, she sought comfort at her sister Stefania's house, but this relief was always temporary, and her dog had to stay in the apartment. Leaving her dog behind was not an option for Alessandra. This emotional connection forced her to return to a dangerous environment repeatedly. Between July and August, the situation grew more volatile. Alessandra shared her experiences of intimidation and increasing aggression with Stefania. Despite her fear, she was still searching for ways to calm the situation. She avoided direct confrontations, perhaps hoping that silence or a calm demeanor would lessen the obsession. However, Giovanni reacted to her distance by becoming even more aggressive, perceiving her withdrawal as a challenge that needed to be addressed. On July 29, 2022, Alessandra took an important step to protect herself by filing a police report. She documented Giovanni's obsessive behavior, his repeated invasions of her privacy, and his increasingly erratic presence near her home. To support her claims, she provided screenshots of messages, photos of him near her residence, and detailed accounts of the stalking that had troubled her for months. Despite this evidence, the police did not take urgent measures. Days went by, and her fear continued. On August 3rd, she returned to the police with more evidence, including additional sightings and further incidents of interference. Although she reiterated her concerns, the case was still considered in its early stages. Investigators acknowledged her claims, but no protective actions were recommended. There was no restraining order, no formal warning issued, and no police presence near her building. By August 8th, she went back to the police again because the harassment had not ceased. Giovanni still showed up near her home and tried to enter the building. She kept meticulous records of each incident, including car damage, power disruptions, and break-in attempts. His messages had also become more aggressive. Yet, the official response to her situation remained unchanged. A fourth visit took place on August 13th. By that time, Alessandra was both exhausted and terrified. She felt she was being watched, followed, and monitored online. Giovanni's control over her life invaded her personal communications and daily activities. She clearly expressed her fear for her life and provided the police with direct quotes from his messages, which contained threats and psychological manipulation. One of her statements was particularly chilling: "I don't want to die." It was not just a plea, it was a stark warning. However, this was insufficient to prompt urgent action from the authorities. They cited procedural limitations, saying that they needed more witness statements. The investigators minimized the threat because there had been no physical attack, treating the case as simple harassment rather than a potential for violence. They failed to recognize the serious situation unfolding before them. Her family would later contest this failure, asserting that the warnings had been clear, consistent, and serious. The progression of events was evident. What started as an obsession with digital activities escalated into physical intimidation. Giovanni's behavior shifted from being reactive to becoming calculated, repetitive, and dangerous. The most significant evidence emerged on August 20th, 2022, just 3 days before the incident. Giovanni made a checklist on his phone, which investigators later discovered in his Notes app. The list was precise, detailing items such as duct tape, a hammer, and restraints. Below the list was a written plan outlining steps to simulate a conversation, find a way to enter, and gather the necessary tools. The thoroughness of this plan eliminated any doubt about his intentions. This was not an act of impulsive anger, it was deliberate planning. On August 21st, Giovanni left Sicily, where he had been involved in football-related activities, and traveled to Senegalia under the pretense of personal business. He continued his journey, arrived in Bologna on August 22nd. Digital records later confirmed Giovanni's movements in unsettling detail. He entered Bologna quietly, without notifying anyone, including Alessandra. After arriving, he concealed a hammer in a bush near Alessandra's apartment building, placing it strategically in a hidden corner of the residential complex. He had thoroughly scouted the area beforehand, meticulously planning each step. That same day, he climbed to the rooftop of the building and watched Alessandra's movements from above. He had been watching her for months, but this time, he was ready to act. Weeks earlier, Giovanni had made a note on his phone, dated July 2nd, stating, "He will end her because she ended him emotionally." In the note, he portrayed himself as a victim, claiming he had been manipulated and abandoned, pushing him to his breaking point. He was fully aware of the consequences of his actions, writing, "He knows he will end up in prison. This note will explain to the police what she did to him." His intentions were clear. He had made this decision long before he traveled north. On the evening of August 23rd, Alessandra arrived home, unaware that Giovanni was waiting nearby. It was just after 9 p.m., and she was on the phone with her sister, Stefania, in a normal conversation built. As Alessandra approached the entrance of the building, Giovanni emerged from his hiding place. The attack happened in seconds. Stefania, still on the phone, noticed a sudden change. Alessandra's voice shifted, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle. In that brief moment, everything fell apart. Witnesses later reported seeing Giovanni attack her. He grabbed a hammer and struck her with such force that the hammerhead broke off the handle. However, he didn't stop there. Giovanni continued to hit her with his fists and then picked up a heavy wrought iron bench from just outside the entrance, using it to beat her repeatedly. He displayed extreme violence, delivering multiple devastating blows. Forensic reports later indicated that she had suffered over 20 traumatic injuries. Alessandra had visible injuries on her skull, chest, arms, and legs, showing evidence of a brutal assault. Her body was found with signs of blunt force trauma, severe fractures, and indications that she had been dragged on the ground. Despite the loud noises and chaos, Giovanni made no attempt to flee. When the police arrived, he was calmly sitting by the front door of the building, waiting. Officers noted his eerie composure. There was no struggle or remorse, only a chilling acceptance of his actions. Alessandra was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, it was too late. Her injuries were severe, and she died shortly after arriving. The evidence was indisputable. His actions were deliberate, and he made no attempt to hide what he had done. The precision in his timing and the weapon's location revealed clear premeditation. Witnesses described him as quick and confident, as if he had rehearsed the act numerous times in his mind. Stefania's phone call, along with both physical and digital evidence, was essential for piecing together the timeline of events. The entire attack lasted just a few minutes, but it followed months of carefully planned psychological abuse. After his arrest, Giovanni was moved to a psychiatric facility. Initially, he chose to remain silent but later made statements blaming Alessandra for what happened, claiming she caused him emotional pain and had broken him. Investigators, however, recognized this as an attempt to mislead. The crime was clearly planned, documented, and carried out with disturbing precision. Although his defense team requested a psychiatric evaluation, court-appointed experts determined that he was fully aware of his actions. He showed obsessive and controlling behavior but did not qualify for an insanity defense. His mental state was intact, and he acted with intent. During sentencing, Giovanni spoke briefly, describing his experience as a nightmare. He told the court that if they considered him sane, he deserved the maximum penalty. He attempted to portray himself as a broken man, but the court was unaffected by his claims. His attempt to blame his victim fell apart under the weight of the evidence. On February 12, 2024, Giovanni Padovani was found guilty of stalking and the premeditated murder of Alessandra Mattuzzi. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court highlighted several aggravating factors: the cruelty of the attack, his lack of remorse, and the extensive psychological abuse that occurred before the crime. The consequences extended beyond the courtroom. Following Alessandra's death, a surge of online hostility targeted her on social media. Mean comments overwhelmed news articles, with strangers criticizing her looks, clothing, and age, as well as the age difference between her and Giovanni. Some even implied that she had provoked his actions. One of the most alarming remarks came from Donatello Alberti, was then director of Croce Bianca of Ferrara, who suggested that her appearance justified Giovanni's jealousy. The backlash was swift, resulting in Alberti's immediate removal from his position. Alessandra's family responded by filing complaints against 5 individuals for their online harassment. In an unusual move, the Bologna prosecutor's office initiated an investigation into this cyber harassment. This case set a significant legal precedent in Italy, marking one of the first times digital defamation against a deceased victim was prosecuted on such a scale. In the view of both the court and the public, Giovanni's actions were not only murder but also the final result of a prolonged campaign of control, psychological, digital, and physical, a heartbreaking example of a system that failed to intervene in time. Experts later recognized his behavior as classic Othello syndrome, a psychological condition characterized by delusional jealousy. Unlike normal jealousy, this disorder involves persistent, irrational thoughts and doubts about a partner's fidelity, along with an inability to accept reality. In severe cases, it can lead to violence, as was the tragic outcome for Alessandra, who lost her life due to this condition. Alessandra Matuzzi's life, defined by compassion and grace, was cruelly ended on August 23, 2022, by Giovanni Padovani's calculated violence, despite her desperate pleas for protection. While his life sentence on February 12, 2024, delivered justice, it could not erase the pain of her family, particularly her sister Stefania, nor the sting of a system that failed to act on her warnings. Alessandra's legacy as a devoted daughter, sister, and professional endures, her warmth forever etched in the hearts of those she loved. Her family's fight against post-murder cyber harassment, culminating in a groundbreaking Italian legal precedent, has sparked vital conversations about digital abuse and victim blaming. Though her loss remains a stark reminder of unchecked stalking and domestic violence, Alessandra's memory fuels a call for stronger protections to ensure no one else suffers her fate. Just after sunrise, a morning exerciser happened to witness a horrifying scene. A young woman was lying lifeless near the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill. There were no clues about what had happened, no sounds, no witnesses, just an eerie silence. Who was she? How did she end up there? And why did her life end so abruptly? As the police started to investigate, they uncovered a tragic story that would impact 2 cities profoundly. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. She was raised in a loving home by her parents, Teresa and Bob Carson. She grew up with her brother Andrew in Athens, where her exceptional qualities began to emerge. From an early age, Eve distinguished herself academically and socially. At Clark Central High School, her remarkable intelligence and charm led her to become the valedictorian and the student body president, winning 55% of the student vote. These early achievements hint at the bright future she is on her way to creating. Eve's warmth, intellect, and leadership grew even stronger when she began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2004. Despite receiving offers from prestigious universities like Princeton and Yale, along with scholarships, Eve opted to attend a public university. She believed in the importance of education and obtained a significant scholarship while pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her goal was to build a career in the medical field. Outside of her studies, Eve engaged deeply in service and leadership. She led multiple student organizations, completed a challenging 4-year leadership program, and participated in outreach initiatives like Girls on the Run. Additionally, she spent time tutoring children in local schools and worked in underprivileged communities abroad through the Moorhead Cane Summer Enrichment Program. Her volunteer experiences took her to Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana, where she served in various roles, including medical assistant and community educator. Eve was not just a student leader, she was a beloved figure in her community. Friends admired her, faculty respected her. Her lively spirit made a positive impact wherever she went. However, in March 2008, everything changed. Eve was last seen at home around 1:30 a.m. after deciding to stay in and study while her housemates went out. Sometime between that moment and early morning, she faced an unimaginable tragedy. By 5 a.m., she was missing. Later that morning, authorities found her car at the intersection of North Street and Hillsborough Street in Chapel Hill, following the tip. Tragically, her body was found just a mile from her home. She had been shot and left. Investigators were initially confused by the case. The motive was unclear, and the incident seemed random. With no immediate suspects, law enforcement began examining phone and bank records for clues. A key piece of evidence in the investigation emerged when Eve's abandoned SUV was discovered. Authorities believe Eve Carson was shot multiple times around 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with one bullet striking her close range in the right temple. To advance the investigation, Chapel Hill police announced a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to her killer's arrest. Forensic specialists found that the last activity on Eve's computer occurred at 3:37 a.m., which helped narrow down the time frame in which she might have been abducted. Just 21 minutes later, at 3:55 a.m., her debit card was used at an ATM in University Mall, Chapel Hill. The ATM recorded several transactions, including one that successfully withdrew the maximum daily limit of $700, while 5 additional attempts failed. Fortunately, the ATM surveillance system captured grainy images of the person using the card. The footage showed a young male wearing a black hoodie and cap, and in one frame, there seemed to be a second figure in the back seat of the car, possibly Eve, although the image was too unclear to confirm. At 4:44 a.m., another attempt was made to withdraw money, but no cameras captured the event. Less than 30 minutes later, Eve was shot and killed. However, her debit card was used again that day at 12:39 p.m., with 2 transactions made at a mini-mart on Moorhead Avenue in Durham. Over the next 2 days, several more suspicious transactions occurred, leading to a crucial piece of evidence. On March 7th, at 12:54 a.m., another surveillance camera captured another man attempting to use Eve's card. This individual was clearly not the same as the person filmed at the University Mall ATM, making him a second key suspect. The failed transaction and the clear video footage became pivotal moments in the investigation. As police worked to identify the individuals involved, the communities of Chapel Hill and Athens came together in grief. Eve Carson was buried on March 9, 2008, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people. At the University of North Carolina, thousands paid their respects with a moment of silence. Initially, the investigation progressed slowly, despite having several images of the suspects. However, on March 12, just 1 week after Eve's murder, authorities received a promising tip. They identified a man who resembled a suspect from the surveillance video as 21-year-old Demario James Atwater. Atwater had a troubled past, with 2 prior felony convictions, making him familiar with the criminal justice system. He had violated parole and committed additional offenses while under supervision, and he was due to appear in court just 2 days before Eve's murder. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, trespassing, and banned substance possession with intent to distribute. He had also been caught with a firearm while on probation, but due to an administrative mistake, his court hearing was postponed past the date of Eve's death. Additionally, Atwater's home on Rosedale Avenue in Durham was located close to the crime scene. The investigation picked up momentum when detectives linked Atwater to Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., 17, a young man who closely resembled the person seen on the University Mall ATM footage. Both were school dropouts from Durham and had attended the same school, making their connection concerning. Atwater and Lovett became the main suspects in a case that shocked 2 communities and left a significant void for those who knew and respected Eve Carson. On the morning of March 12, 2008, authorities took action. After gathering substantial evidence and appealing to the public for information, police arrested 21-year-old DeMario in Durham, charging him with the first-degree murder of Eve Carson. The case was developing quickly. Chapel Hill's mayor acknowledged the progress made but reminded the public of the profound grief that enveloped the town. A cherished student was lost, and the community was still struggling to cope with her absence. Lovett was eventually found and charged alongside Atwater. Although he was a minor, Lovett had a prior criminal record that included probation for theft and breaking and entering. Both he and Atwater was clear video evidence connecting them to ATM transactions made with Eve's card. The investigation reached a crucial stage in late March when a grand jury indicted both men on multiple serious charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, armed robbery, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony larceny, and possession of stolen property. Lovett faced additional legal issues as he was also charged in connection with the earlier murder of 29-year-old Abhijit Mahato, a Duke University graduate student from India. Mahato had been kidnapped from his home on January 18, 2008, just weeks before Eve's death. He was forced to withdraw cash from an ATM and was later shot while returning home. There were many similarities between this case and Eve's, but the evidence linking Lovett to Mahato's murder was not strong enough, leading to his acquittal. Abhijit Mahato's murder remains unsolved to this day. The legal proceedings in Eve Carson's case have started in earnest. Prosecutors decided to try Atwater and Lovett separately. Atwater, being an adult, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Lovett, due to his age at the time of the crime, could not receive that sentence. The prosecution began to piece together a disturbing account of events that took place in the early hours of March 5, 2008, a crime driven by greed and chance. Around 1:30 a.m., Eve remained at home to study while her roommates went out. Atwater and Lovett then saw Carson walking toward her car. They stormed into Carson's car with Lovett in the driver's seat and Atwater in the back seat. They forced she into the back seat, where Atwater held her hostage at gunpoint. Investigators concluded that the two were looking for an easy target. Both had been released on bond, were low on money, and had no prior connection to Eve. She was just a stranger they happened to encounter. This marked the start of a tragic series of events that would lead to a brutal and senseless murder. Digital records show that Eve Carson's computer was last active at 3:37 a.m. on March 5, 2008. Shortly after, her life took a tragic turn when she was kidnapped by Atwater and Lovett. They put her in the back seat of her own SUV and drove to several ATMs to withdraw cash. Surveillance cameras captured them at an ATM. Their second attempt at 4:44 a.m. at mall failed because they had already reached Eve's daily withdrawal limit. Lovett told a friend that throughout the ordeal, Carson tried to reason with her captors, telling them that they did not have to do what they were doing. She also begged for her life, telling them that they could take whatever they wanted and that they did not have to kill her. However, Lovett and Atwater decided to kill Carson because she had seen their faces. They took her to a wooded area about a mile from UNC to commit the murder. Carson had been shot 5 times. She was first attacked in the right shoulder, right upper arm, right buttock, right cheek with a .25 caliber pistol. Blood found in Carson's lungs during an autopsy showed that she was still alive and breathing after being attacked with the pistol. The 5th and fatal shot she received was from a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. It went through her right hand, suggesting she was trying to shield herself, into her right temple and brain. According to a forensic psychologist and crime analyst, the way Carson was shot showed a complete lack of respect for others. After his arrest, DeMario James Atwater confessed to his involvement in the crime. He confirmed that he was captured on the ATM footage and identified Lovett as his accomplice. To avoid going to trial, Atwater pleaded guilty to all federal charges and directly apologized to Eve's parents during sentencing. On September 23, 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, thus escaping the death penalty. In contrast, Lovett decided to fight the charges against him. He pleaded not guilty to various state offenses, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, larceny, and possession of stolen property. His trial began in December 2011. After 2 weeks, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Complications arose soon after. In 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned Lovette's sentence, referencing a U.S. Supreme Court decision that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Lovette was 17 years old at the time of Eve's murder, which prompted a new sentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lovette spoke to the court, expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the pain he had caused. He argued that he was not the monster he was portrayed to be. However, the court upheld its previous decision, sentencing him once more to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision many felt was justified due to the severity of the crime. Since being incarcerated, Lovette has received several disciplinary infractions, indicating limited progress in his rehabilitation. Despite being a minor at the time of the murder, he has continued to display violent and disruptive behavior while in prison. There were further ripples tied to this case. Months after Diario's arrest, his stepbrother Shelton was fatally shot while leaving a party. Unlike Diario, Shelton was not involved in criminal activity, and his death devastated their family, particularly their mother, who, in less than a year, lost both sons in different tragedies. Eve's murder also cast a harsh light on failings within the criminal justice system. At the time of her death, both Lovette and Atwater were on probation and had repeatedly violated the terms of their release. Probation officers failed to respond effectively, even after discovering that Atwater had breached conditions multiple times. In February 2008, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Atwater, and he was taken into custody, but he posted a $10,000 bond and was released just days before Eve's murder. His court date had been scheduled for March 3rd, but was delayed due to administrative errors. 2 days later, Eve was dead. Authorities believe that the desire to recover his lost bond money was a key motivation for Atwater's involvement in the robbery. It is deeply frustrating that a series of bureaucratic failures allowed two dangerous individuals to remain free. The consequences were irreversible. Eve Carson was more than a victim, she was an exceptional young woman whose light touched countless lives. Intelligent, joyful, and driven, she dedicated herself to public service, education, and global outreach. Her legacy of compassion and leadership lives on. In her honor, the University of North Carolina established the Eve Carson Scholarship. The award, designed by students and approved posthumously, reflects Eve's own vision for helping others achieve their potential. It is granted annually to 2 juniors who demonstrate the same commitment to service, leadership, and academic excellence. Eve was considering graduate studies in science policy. Her future was bright, but that story was stolen. For all her achievements, it is the character of Eve Carson that continues to resonate. In her final moments, she chose to respond to hatred with compassion, asking her killers to pray. Even in fear, she embodied grace. Though her life was ended for less than $1,500, her impact was and remains immeasurable. The murder of Eve Carson in March 2008 was more than a singular act of violence. It was a seismic event that shattered the tranquility of Chapel Hill and Athens, exposing the fragility of life and the consequences of systemic shortcomings. Eve, a young woman of boundless potential, embodied the best of humanity: intelligence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. Her senseless death, driven by greed and indifference, left communities grappling with grief and questions that linger to this day. Yet, from this tragedy emerged a powerful testament to her character and influence. The investigation and prosecution of her killers, Demario James Atwater and Lawrence Alvin Lovette Jr., brought a measure of justice, but it also laid bare the failures of a criminal justice system that allowed 2 individuals with troubled histories to remain free. The bureaucratic oversights that enabled their actions underscore the need for vigilance, reform, and accountability. Eve's death became a catalyst for change, prompting North Carolina to overhaul its probation system and sparking broader conversations about safety and prevention. Her loss was a clarion call to address the cracks in the systems meant to protect us, ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Eve Carson's legacy is a challenge to us all, to live purposefully, to serve selflessly, and to confront injustice with resolve. Her life, though tragically brief, was a masterpiece of impact, and her memory continues to shape a better future. On November 23, 2013, in Santa Cruz Harbor, California, Forrest Hayes, a prominent figure in the tech industry, was found dead. His body was located on his luxury yacht, the Escape, which he owned. He was discovered unconscious in one of the cabins, and attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. Local law enforcement responded after the yacht's captain called for help. The circumstances surrounding Forrest's death were puzzling. He was lying on his back with no signs of struggle. An injection mark was visible on his arm, but no syringe or medical supplies were found nearby, raising questions about whether his death was accidental or intentional. The cabin appeared disordered. There were 2 wine glasses on a small table, one with lipstick marks, indicating he had company. All the windows were covered with curtains, and the lighting was dim, contributing to an atmosphere of privacy. The scene looked strangely staged, yet there were no clear signs of violence. The yacht's captain told the police that Forrest often used the boat for private outings. He noted that Forrest liked spending time alone on the yacht, but he also had guests from time to time. The coroner's initial assessment indicated that an overdose could be the cause of death. However, at the start of the investigation, it was unclear if this overdose was by accident or on purpose. The lack of a syringe near the body raised further questions. To find answers, investigators began looking into Forrest's life, including his contacts, business dealings, personal relationships, and the events leading up to his death. The main question in the investigation was, who was with Forrest in the last hours of his life? The presence of a wine glass with lipstick suggested that a woman might have been involved. However, neither the captain nor the harbor staff saw anyone exit after Forrest boarded the yacht. The investigation began by examining Forrest's phone, which was found near his body. An initial review of his apps and messages did not show anything suspicious, but detectives chose to look deeper into his personal life. As they explored Forrest's connections and habits, it became clear that his seemingly perfect life could be hiding unexpected secrets. Uncovering these secrets became a key goal for law enforcement as they sought to understand what happened aboard the Escape that tragic evening. Forrest Hayes was born on May 10, 1962, in Dearborn, Michigan. From a young age, he showed exceptional learning abilities. His curiosity, problem-solving skills, and natural charisma made him a leader among his peers. Teachers and classmates often praised his dynamic personality and commitment to excellence, which set the stage for his future success. After graduating from high school, Forrest attended a prestigious university where he studied engineering and computer science. He quickly mastered the latest technologies and began developing his own projects, which caught the attention of major tech companies. His career took off in the early 1980s, during the early growth of the information technology industry. A key moment in Forrest's career occurred when he joined Apple in 2005. At that time, Apple was rapidly expanding and working on innovative products like the iPhone and iPad. Forrest took a position in a crucial department focused on developing new technologies. His contributions to Apple's projects were so impactful that he quickly gained the respect of both his colleagues and the leadership team. Forrest was not just a skilled professional, he was also an innovator with a unique ability to find unconventional solutions to challenging problems, making him an invaluable team member. Colleagues remembered Forrest's unwavering determination to implement innovative ideas that improved the functionality and accessibility of Apple's products. During his time at Apple, he worked on technologies that later became industry standards. However, he didn't rest on his successes and soon accepted a position at Google, joining the company in 2007. At Google, he became part of Google X, a division focused on developing advanced technologies. His role involved overseeing projects related to autonomous vehicles, smart devices, and other innovative advancements. Notably, he contributed to the creation of self-driving vehicle systems, a significant breakthrough in autonomous transportation. Colleagues described Forrest Hayes as an inspiring leader who motivated his team to reach ambitious goals. He was strict but fair, promoting a positive work environment. Forrest embraced challenging tasks, which earned him the respect and admiration of his colleagues. His ability to blend strategic thinking with attention to detail enabled him to successfully lead large-scale projects that shaped the future of technology. Forrest's professional success was closely connected to his family life. In 1996, he married Denise Hayes. Together they built a strong relationship based on understanding and support. They had 5 children: Lauren, Danielle, Lily, Roscoe, and Zosia. Forrest was not only a successful businessman but also a dedicated father. Even with a busy work schedule, he always prioritized his family. Those who knew him said he loved spending time with his children, planning family trips, and creating traditions that brought them closer. Their family life seemed joyful. They living in a $4 million home in one of California's finest neighborhoods, which offered a peaceful and comfortable environment. Forrest's biggest joy came from outings on his yacht, the Escape. To him, the yacht represented family togetherness. He regularly took his family on short trips, enjoying quality time and relaxation away from the busy city life. Friends and colleagues admired how he balanced his career success with his family commitments. He exemplified the ability to manage both professional achievements and personal responsibilities. Although Forrest appeared outwardly harmonious, he sometimes shared with close friends that he felt empty inside. He had accomplished everything he had ever dreamed of, yet it didn't fully satisfy him. This sense of restlessness may have pushed him to pursue new experiences and interests, ultimately resulting in tragic outcomes. A key part of Forrest's secret life was his use of the app Seeking Arrangement. This platform connects wealthy individuals with younger partners for informal relationships that often involve financial support. Forrest actively used the app, and an investigation into his account showed that he had been messaging many women, setting up meetings, and negotiating the terms of their interactions. His relationships were not just casual. Forrest was known for generously supporting his partners by covering their expenses, giving them expensive gifts, and meeting in private settings. One such location was his yacht, which originally served as a family vessel for short trips but later became a personal getaway for him and the women he met through the app. The yacht offered the privacy, allowing him to avoid unwanted attention. The captain of the yacht, employed by Forrest, later informed the police that it was frequently used for these meetings. He recalled that Forrest sometimes took women on short trips or spent several hours alone with them on board. The captain noted that these encounters happened often but were covered by a confidentiality agreement. Alcohol was typically involved, and in some cases, illegal substances were also present. Messages found on Forrest's phone showed he discussed acquiring these substances, and occasionally, his partners would bring them at his request. This information shocked his colleagues and family, who were completely unaware of his secret life. Investigators paid special attention to a woman Forrest had met through Seeking Arrangement. A week before his death, he arranged to meet her on his yacht, where they spent the evening drinking wine and using substances that made Forrest feel unwell. In messages after their meeting, Forrest acknowledged he wasn't feeling well but expressed no desire to stop these activities. Forrest lived 2 distinct lives. In one, he was a dedicated husband, father, and respected professional. In the other, he sought excitement and a break from his daily routine. His colleagues and friends were unaware of this hidden side of him, and his family believed his yacht trips were simply a way for him to manage stress. These private meetings, which Forrest viewed as a release from his demanding job, ultimately had tragic consequences. The yacht, once a symbol of his achievement and independence, became the place where his 2 lives intersected, leading to his untimely death. This situation forced both investigators and Forrest's loved ones to reevaluate their perception of a man they had believed was perfect. Alex Tichelman was born on April 8, 1987, in Canada. Her biological parents are unknown because she was adopted by Leslie Ann and Bart Tichelman at a young age. They provided her with a stable and loving home, along with financial security. Leslie Ann worked in retail, while Bart held an executive position at a major company, which gave the family a respected social status. Alex grew up in a joyful environment. She thrived in school, particularly in literature, and aspired to become a writer. Her teachers appreciate her creativity and imagination. Besides her academic success, she enjoyed sports and actively participated in school competitions. Her parents were proud of her accomplishments, invested in her education, and supported her dreams. During her adolescence, Alex started experiencing a range of problems. At 14, she randomly tried cannabis, which led her to gradually engage in more risky behaviors. Initially, she experimented with lighter substances, but by 16, she had begun using harder drugs. This shift had a significant impact on her life. She began to skip school, quit sports, and distance herself from her parents. Leslie Ann and Bart worked hard to support their daughter. They consulted psychologists and took her to counseling, but things only got worse. In a last-ditch effort to help her, they sent Alex to a private rehabilitation school in Maine that had a strict approach for dealing with troubled teens. They hoped that being away from her usual surroundings would help her get back on track. Unfortunately, her time at the school did not yield the desired results. Alex struggled to adjust and soon returned home, where she reverted to her old habits. By the age of 18, Alex had left school. She explored different career paths, including journalism, but quickly lost interest. Her progress was repeatedly hindered by her battles with substance abuse. This addiction made it difficult for her to build a personal or professional life. In 2010, Alex moved to San Francisco, hoping to start fresh in the entertainment industry. She created a YouTube channel to share makeup tutorials and her daily life, but the project did not succeed, leading to more disappointment. In search of a way to distinguish herself, she ventured into modeling. However, she found that the conventional modeling standards did not fit her, so she decided to focus on fetish photography. She took part in BDSM-style photo shoots that emphasized shock and provocation. While this choice helped her connect with an audience, it did not provide her with financial stability. Alex continued to struggle with her addictions, living from one job to another and facing ongoing challenges. In 2011, Alex started using the Seeking Arrangement platform to connect with wealthy partners who could offer her financial support and a more luxurious lifestyle. Through this platform, she met Forrest Hayes. Their relationship began with typical discussions about the terms of their meetings. Forrest was looking for a companion for private gatherings on his yacht, Escape. He offered financial assistance and generous gifts in return. For Alex, this was a chance to gain the stability she needed. Initially, their meetings were casual and included wine and light conversation. However, things changed when investigators found out that Forrest sometimes asked Alex to bring illegal substances to their meetings, promising her extra money for doing so. Alex saw this as a way to earn more, and as a result, their meetings became more frequent, primarily taking place on the yacht Escape. One important person in Alex Tichelman's life was Dean Riopelli, the owner of popular nightclubs in Atlanta. Their relationship began in 2011, quickly drew attention because of their significant age difference. Dean was 51, while Alex was just 24. Despite this gap, they were both fully engaged in a lively and intense lifestyle. Dean was not only a successful entrepreneur but also a dedicated rock musician. His clubs played a key role in Atlanta's music scene. His band frequently performed there. Known for his charm, energy, and love for a free-spirited lifestyle, Dean became a major influence in Alex's life, who was seeking both stability and affirmation. Their relationship was filled with the wild excitement typical of rock and roll, including party. However, beneath this glamorous exterior, there were significant conflicts. Dean's friends and colleagues observed that Alex often triggered arguments. Her impulsive behavior, worsened by alcohol and substance use, made their relationship unstable. In September 2013, just weeks before the unfortunate incident involving Forrest Hayes, Alex reported Dean to the police, claiming he was aggressive. However, when the officers arrived, they discovered a different story. Witnesses stated that Alex was acting erratically that night. She had drunk too much alcohol, created a disturbance at a club, and even attacked Dean, including biting his finger and leaving marks. Consequently, Alex was charged with filing a false report and assault. This situation illustrated the ongoing tension in their relationship, which, despite hints of affection, was deteriorating due to persistent conflicts. A few weeks later, on September 24, 2013, Dean was found unconscious in his home. Alex called emergency services, stating that he had collapsed after a long night of partying. She said she had briefly gone to the bathroom. When she returned, she found him on the floor. Paramedics arrived and declared him dead at the scene. An autopsy indicated that the cause of death was a heart attack related to an overdose of illegal substances. However, this finding raised doubts among Dean's friends and family, who insisted that he strongly opposed banned substance use and avoided even basic painkillers. Their belief made the official death ruling seem inconsistent. Despite their concerns, the case was closed due to lack of evidence of foul play. Dean's death, initially deemed accidental, came back into the spotlight in 2014 when Alex was arrested in connection with the case of Forrest Hayes. During the investigation, police found similarities between the two cases. The substances linked to Forrest's death were the same as those found in Dean's system. This discovery led to the reopening of Dean's case. Additionally, Alex's mysterious social media posts heightened suspicions. Dean's family supported the reopening of the case, arguing that the original investigation was too superficial. They believed Alex's involvement with illegal substances indicated that she might have played a role in Dean's death, but no solid evidence was ever found to connect her directly to the incident. Despite the renewed investigation, Dean's case remains officially closed, and Alex's suspected involvement has never been proven. This uncertainty continues to leave unanswered questions. Investigators were able to piece together the events from the night Forrest was found dead using evidence, witness statements, and video footage from cameras on the yacht. On November 22, 2013, Forrest arrived at the yacht named Escape in the afternoon, as was his usual routine, and boarded by himself. Soon after, Alex joined him on the yacht. According to the captain, Forrest had asked the crew to leave for the evening because he wanted privacy and a relaxing night. The functioning cameras on the yacht captured footage of Forrest and Alex in the main cabin, where they were talking, laughing, and drinking wine. Alex brought a bag, which was later found to contain banned substance and syringes. As the night went on, their conversation became more informal, and Alex took out a syringe filled with a substance. She injected herself first and then offered it to Forrest, who accepted. The camera recorded the moment she injected him. Shortly after being injected, Forrest's health quickly worsened. He lost consciousness and collapsed on the couch. At first, Alex did not realize the seriousness of the situation. She kept drinking her wine and looking around the cabin. Eventually, she tried to wake Forrest by shaking him, but he did not respond. Frightened when she realized he was not waking up, Alex began to panic. She hurriedly packed her belongings, including the syringes and leftover drugs, in an effort to eliminate potential evidence. She also wiped the wine glass she had used to remove her lipstick marks, although she missed some of them. The video showed her quickly drawing the cabin curtains, checking the area to ensure no clear evidence of her was left. Afterward, Alex left the yacht without informing anyone of what had occurred, leaving Forrest unconscious on the couch. For several hours, no one checked on him. It was only later, when Forrest's worried wife reached out to the captain, that he returned to the yacht and found Forrest's lifeless body. The investigation found that Alex attempted to go into hiding after the incident. She turned off her phone and left the marina to avoid being found. However, video footage from the yacht, lipstick marks on a wine glass, fingerprints, and text messages exchanged between Forrest and Alex on his phone helped investigators reconstruct what happened. Alex's behavior on the yacht suggested she played a significant role in the tragedy. A critical question still lingered: was the injection intentional, or was it a reckless choice? Once Alex was identified as a main suspect in Forrest Hayes' death, law enforcement initiated a manhunt to find her. After the incident, Alex disappeared, which further fueled suspicions about her involvement. With her phone off and her previously active social media account silent, tracking her became increasingly difficult. Investigators developed a strategy to track down Alex using her profile on Seeking Arrangement. This app became crucial for locating her. They created a fake profile of a wealthy man looking for new companions. Despite trying to stay low-key, Alex couldn't resist the promise of financial benefit and agreed to a meeting. After several days of communication, she set up a rendezvous at a quiet location in California. When Alex arrived, she was arrested by law enforcement. The operation went smoothly. She did not resist arrest, though her demeanor was described as calm and indifferent. During the arrest, she claimed not to understand the charges against her, but she was soon formally charged with second-degree manslaughter, evidence tampering, and illegal distribution of controlled substances. The trial began in early 2014 and quickly attracted media attention because of Alex's appearance and controversial background. She became known as the beauty-turned-criminal. Her photos, past interviews, and courtroom behavior were frequently discussed. Alex maintained a calm and confident demeanor, often dressing stylishly, which elicited mixed reactions from the public. The prosecution argued that Alex was fully aware of the risks involved in her actions. They presented video evidence from the yacht showing her giving an injection to Forrest and then leaving without helping him. They claimed this showed her indifference and attempts to avoid responsibility. In contrast, Alex's defense team argued that she acted at Forrest's request, did not intend to cause harm. They maintained that his death was a tragic accident and that she left in a panic. They also pointed out that Forrest had requested the substances and consented to the injection. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Alex as a heartless criminal responsible for the death of a successful and respected man, while others saw her as a victim of circumstance, questioning the ethics of Forrest's actions, including his use of a dating app and engagement in risky behavior. In May 2015, Alex reached a plea deal with the prosecution. She admitted to involuntary manslaughter and possession of illegal substances in exchange for a shorter sentence and the chance to avoid a jury trial. Alex was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with credit for the time she had already spent incarcerated. This decision led to a renewed debate. Some people thought the sentence was too light given the situation, while others believed it was appropriate because there was no solid proof of intent to harm. After completing her sentence, Alex was deported to Canada, her birthplace, in 2017. Despite this, her name continued to appear in discussions and articles about high-profile crimes. To the public, Forrest became a representation of double lives, risky choices, and the significant consequences of reckless decisions that resulted in a tragedy affecting many people. After her release, Alex tried to rebuild her life. For a while, she stayed away from the public, avoiding media interviews and social media. A year later, she did her first major interview with a Canadian journalist through video call. In the interview, Alex appeared calm and composed, but many perceived her as emotionally detached. Her account of the events reignited controversy, sparked new discussions about her actions and their aftermath. She stated that she never meant to harm Forrest Hayes and was shocked by his death. Alex claimed that she had given him the injection at his request, insisted that she was unaware of any existing health problems he might have had. She believed that Forrest was aware of his limits, was in control of his actions. Additionally, she denied trying to hide evidence, explaining that her actions were the result of panic and poor judgment in the moment. Her statements contradicted the evidence in the case. Footage from the yacht showed Alex not only cleaning up evidence of her presence but also leaving without trying to get help. This raised further doubts about her honesty, drew sharp criticism from Forrest's family, who accused her of trying to deflect blame. Her comments about Dean Riopelli were equally controversial. In the interview, Alex described their relationship as troubled yet real, claiming she was devastated by his death. However, she avoided questions about the cause of Dean's overdose and the details of their last meeting. Her lack of response only increased suspicions among Dean's family, who had earlier called for the case to be reopened, stating that Alex's statements generated more questions than answers. The investigation into Dean Riopelli's death remains unresolved. In 2018, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office stated that the case was under review, but there have been no updates since then. Reports suggest that investigators did not find any new evidence to confirm or deny Alex's involvement, leaving Dean's family uncertain. Currently, Alex Tichelman lives in Canada and maintains a mostly private life. Her social media accounts are inactive, and journalists have had little success reaching her for comments. Some view Alex as a victim of unfortunate circumstances, while others regard her as cold and calculating, believing her actions contributed to two tragedies. The deaths of Forrest Hayes and Dean Riopelli raise many questions. Were they really accidental? What was Alex Tichelman's involvement in these tragic situations? In May 2023, police in Spain received a troubling call from a peaceful neighborhood in Torremolinos. Inside one of the apartments, they found the body of a young woman who had been stabbed multiple times. The suspect managed to escape but was caught a few hours later at a nearby cafe. However, this tragedy was just the starting point for a string of discoveries that connected to a case that had remained unsolved for 9 years. Behind the wall of a different apartment, investigators uncovered evidence that stunned even the most seasoned forensic professionals. In 2011, Sabora Gagani lived with her boyfriend Marco Gayo Romeo in a small house in Torremolinos, Spain, close to the beaches. On the surface, their life appeared stable. Sabora worked as a waitress, and Marco was a chef. She frequently called her mother, Elisabetta, to reassure her that everything was fine. However, beneath this facade of stability were serious issues that became more apparent over time. When Elisabetta visited, she could immediately sense the tension in their home. Arguments between Sabora and Marco happened even in front of her. Elisabetta noticed that Sabora often tried to excuse Marco's jealousy and anger, attributing them to temporary difficulties. Yet, Elisabetta believed that their problems were much deeper than everyday challenges. Just 2 years ago, Sabora was a very different person. Sabora was born on September 14, 1991, in Albania. She was known for her vibrant and cheerful nature from an early age. After her parents divorced, her mother, Elisabetta, relocated with her children to Rome, Italy, where they began anew. Sabora quickly became well-liked by her peers, earning the nickname Tibby because of her lively and warm personality. Despite facing financial difficulties, she was determined to help her family. She began working as a waitress at a young age but never lost sight of her dreams. Her natural beauty, slim figure, and success in a local beauty contest opened doors to the modeling industry. However, her greatest aspiration was to become a teacher, as she truly loved working with children. Things started to change when Sabora turned 18. At a cafe, she met Marco, a 31-year-old man whose charm and confidence immediately attracted her. At that time, she knew very little about him. He was divorced, had a sister, and seemed eager to start anew. However, beneath this appealing exterior was a troubled past. Marco had a reputation for aggressive behavior and issues with substance abuse, which had led to multiple encounters with the police. Despite these red flags, Sabora was drawn to his charisma and chose to ignore the warnings. A year into their relationship, Marco proposed that Sabora move with him to Spain, claiming that there were better job opportunities there than in Italy. Elisabetta tried to convince her against it, expressing doubts about Marco's intentions, but Sabora was determined. She believed this move would be the start of a new chapter where she and Marco could create a happy life together. Initially, Spain seemed like a great opportunity for Sabora and Marco. Sabora quickly secured a job as a waitress, while Marco found work as a pizza chef. They rented a cozy home, and Sabora shared her hopeful plans with her mother. Unfortunately, their stability didn't last long. Marco started losing job after job, often blaming his employers for his failures. His frustration and jealousy intensified, leading to a rise in his aggressive behavior, which escalated from small disagreements to serious conflicts. When Elisabetta visited Spain to check on Sabora, she was taken aback by the situation. Sabora, once vibrant, confident, now appeared withdrawn and subdued. Marco showed his irritation openly in Elisabetta's presence. Their arguments became louder. Despite these significant issues, Sabora continued to defend Marco, reassuring her mother that everything would get better. Those who knew Sabora were confused about why she ignored the warning signs in her relationship, She may have looked to Marco for the support and stability she missed during her childhood. When her family moved from Albania to Italy, they faced many challenges. Elisabetta worked hard to create a better life for her children, but Sabora had to take on adult responsibilities at a young age. Her relationship with Marco seemed like a way to fill the emotional gap, but instead, it added more stress. Life in Spain was becoming increasingly difficult for Sabora as her youthful dreams faded away. In July 2014, Sabora Gagani vanished unexpectedly, leaving her family in despair. The last time she was heard from was through a text message to Marco, her ex-partner, on July 7th. After that, her phone was off, and her social media accounts were inactive, which was not typical for her. Earlier, Sabora had told her mother she had finally broken up with Marco, moved into a new apartment, and felt a sense of freedom. She compared it to a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. However, her abrupt silence worried everyone. The situation became even more puzzling when Marco showed up unexpectedly at Elisabetta's home in Italy. He tried to act like a concerned and remorseful man, claiming to care about what had happened. While having coffee, he told Elisabetta that he had no idea where Sabora might be. Marco explained that they had argued shortly before she vanished, and she had left without taking her belongings. However, he later changed his story, saying that a security guard at their apartment complex had seen Sabora leaving with 2 suitcases. These inconsistent statements raised more suspicions and increased worries. Elisabetta remembered that just a few days before, Sabora had decided to end her relationship with Marco for good after 3 years of attempts to fix things. Despite her efforts to distance herself from him, Marco remained persistently involved in her life. In early July, he unexpectedly called Elisabetta to ask if Sabora had returned to Italy. This question seemed strange to Elisabetta, especially considering Sabora's recent breakup and her repeated attempts to cut ties with Marco. Her mother recalled that, before, in 2013, Sabora had even gone back to her mother's home in Italy to leave everything behind, had realized that there was no future for her and Marco. However, Marco refused to let go. He traveled to Italy to see Sabora, begging her to give him another chance and promising to change, even proposing to her. Ultimately, exhausted by their turbulent relationship, Sabora succumbed to his promises. Unfortunately, the same cycle of jealousy, control, and aggressive behavior soon returned, disrupting her peace once again. At one point, Sabora told her mother that if she ever left Marco for good, she might have to disappear completely because she feared he wouldn't let her go. In the following months, Sabora made frequent trips to Italy, likely because her Spanish residency permit had expired. There were reports that she may have used a fake Italian ID for these travels. Elisabetta noticed her daughter appeared more and more scared, but Sabora rarely provided details about her situation. She only mentioned she was looking for a way to escape her troubles. Her family realized something was seriously wrong. Sabora would never cut off contact with them, especially with her mother and brothers. Now, all they could do was wait and hope that Sabora had chosen to go into hiding to escape Marco's grip. However, the conflicting stories and complete silence from her only raised more concerns. By 2015, the investigation into Sabora's disappearance had not made significant progress, despite the efforts of her family and law enforcement. Her mother, Elisabetta, was determined to file an official report with the authorities. She strongly believed that Marco, Sabora's ex-partner, was involved, as he was the last person known to have seen her before she disappeared. His behavior during the investigation only deepened suspicions. When questioned, Marco stuck to his story, claiming that Sabora left their home after an argument, after that they lost contact with each other. However, many of her personal items, including clothes and identification, remained in the apartment, which was strange. Despite his claims, Marco never reported her missing to the police. Instead, he claimed he tried to find her himself by printing and distributing flyers in their neighborhood. He also provided conflicting theories about where she might be, suggesting at one point that she had traveled to Argentina or had been seen with an unknown man with whom she allegedly had a confrontation. These statements were inconsistent and lacked credible evidence. Elisabetta, feeling distrustful of Marco, took matters into her own hands to find her daughter. She contacted the media and a specialized organization that helps raise awareness about missing persons cases. As a result, photos of Sabora and requests for information started appearing in both Italian and Spanish news outlets. However, these efforts did not lead to any new information. While Sabora's family continued to search for answers, Marco seemed to be living a fairly normal life. He changed his appearance by shaving his head and growing a beard, likely to avoid drawing attention. During this period, he entered into 2 new relationships, both of which ended due to the women complaining about his aggressive behavior. Nevertheless, Marco stayed in Spain, frequently going to the gym and joining a shooting club, which concerned those who knew his background. Sabora's family refused to lose hope. Elisabetta continually urged the police to step up their investigation. As a response, law enforcement began reviewing the case files to identify any overlooked details. They paid close attention to Marco's statements, which had seemed inconsistent from the start. Moreover, there were questions about why he hadn't contacted the police immediately after she went missing. As time went on, public interest in Sabora's case decreased. Despite her family's relentless search for answers, Marco, who was still in Spain, seemed to adapt to life after her disappearance. To his neighbors, he seemed friendly, focused on fitness and socializing. However, concerns about his character lingered due to his past relationship with Sabora and complaints from his new partners. While Sabora's family held on to hope for updates, the investigation remained stalled. Authorities broadened their search using international missing persons databases, but these efforts produced no leads. For those who knew Sabora well, the uncertainty about her fate was agonizing. By 2023, Marco seemed to have changed his life for the better. He was now living with a new partner, Paula, and they had a child together. Yet, beneath this seemingly fresh start, the same problems that troubled Marco for years persisted. His relationship with Paula was unstable. She confided in close friends and co-workers about experiencing physical abuse from him. During this time, Marco had difficulty maintaining a steady job, which made their financial situation worse. Over time, Paula became more aware of the challenges in Paula and Marco's relationship. She felt that Marco was not only aggressive at work but also unsupportive at home. Despite Paula's efforts to create the appearance of a normal life, her struggles were becoming apparent. For Paula, her primary goal was to save enough money to leave Marco and fight for her children's custody. Marco's situation was getting worse. He often told his master about his financial problems, stating he was working only for his family's sake. However, his aggressive behavior at work and inability to get along with co-workers made his master wonder if keeping him employed was worth the hassle. Meanwhile, Paula's friend noticed how serious Paula's situation was and encouraged her to stand up against the mistreatment. Despite this, Paula was too afraid to take any confrontational action. She confided in her friend that Marco had hit her 4 times and kicked her, but she minimized the seriousness of these incidents. This indicated that Paula needed immediate help. On Tuesday, May 16, 2023, Paula enjoyed her day off, excitedly sharing her plans for a relaxing evening with her coworkers. However, the next day, May 17, took a tragic turn. Around 11:30 a.m., loud shouting came from the apartment that Paula shared with Marco. Although arguments were common between them, this time it sounded much more severe. Paula's voice was clearly heard, calling for help. Victor, Marco's landlord and boss, could hear a loud disturbance coming from her apartment. Worried, he hurried over with a co-worker from the restaurant. When they arrived at the door, they began knocking and shouting to find out what was going on inside. They heard soft sobbing, which then stopped abruptly. Shortly after, Marco opened the door, appearing calm, and told them everything was fine, saying Paula had just gone to bed. However, the absence of Paula's voice made Victor uneasy. This situation was particularly alarming given recent events. Just days earlier, Victor had fired Marco after a series of troubling incidents, including the mysterious disappearance of a kitchen knife. Victor had begun to distrust Marco and wanted to prevent any further issues. Now, Marco was involved in another troubling situation. While Victor went to get a spare key to the apartment, the co-worker called the police. Marco, seeming to recognize that the situation was getting serious, remained calm but acted unexpectedly. He suddenly left the apartment and walked out of the building without explanation. When the police arrived, they found the apartment locked. Victor soon returned with a spare key and entered the apartment to investigate further. Inside one of the rooms, they discovered Paula's body on the floor, stabbed 14 times. Her clothes were drenched in blood, and it was clear she had died several hours prior. The police secured the crime scene and called in forensic experts to gather evidence. They also began searching for Marco, who had fled the scene. Meanwhile, Paula's body was sent for an autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. Just a few hours later, Marco was found sitting calmly at a cafe table. He did not resist arrest and appeared unfazed by the situation. On May 20, 2023, 3 days after Paula's tragic death, Marco appeared in court. He was charged with a crime involving aggravating circumstances related to gender-based violence. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation and substance testing. Marco was denied bail and remained in custody during the hearing. He chose to stay silent, only speaking to respond to his lawyer's questions. There was no mention of Sabora Gagani. However, just a few days after his arrest, Sabora's case gained attention again. Marco then made a surprising confession while being interrogated at the police station. He stated that during an argument in 2014, he had killed Sabora and hidden her body in the apartment they shared. Despite his confession, law enforcement decided to focus on the investigation into Paula's death first and postponed verifying Marco's claims about Sabora. Elisabetta, Sabora's mother, was devastated by the news of Marco's arrest and his admission about her daughter. For 9 years, she had advocated for a reopening of the investigation, convinced of Marco's involvement in Sabora's disappearance. Marco's confession led to the official reopening of Sabora's case, prompting investigators to validate his statements, starting with a look into the apartment where he and Sabora had lived in 2014. By early June 2023, Spanish investigators concentrating on Sabora's case meticulously examined the building layout where she and Marco had lived. A notable detail emerged: there was a large space that should have been part of the bedroom according to the building plans, but it was missing in reality. After receiving permission, investigators entered the apartment on June 6 and broke through the wall. They found a large wooden box filled with lime. Inside the box, police discovered important evidence: a plastic bag containing a knife with dried blood and personal items believed to belong to Sabora. Among these items was a wilted bouquet of flowers on top. The box also contained several plastic bags, one of which had a camping sleeping bag that held human remains. These remains were sent for forensic analysis to identify the person and determine the cause of death. To confirm the identity, Spanish authorities requested DNA samples from Sabora's family in Italy. On June 10, police visited the home of Sabora Gagani's mother, Elisabetta, to collect a saliva sample. The DNA results confirmed that the recovered remains belonged to Sabora. In the week that followed, new information about Marco's actions came to light. During interrogations in Spain, he claimed to have tried to dispose of the body using acid, but this claim could not be verified. Investigators observed that Marco often changed his statements. For Elisabetta, the confirmation of her daughter's remains was heartbreaking. After 9 years of uncertainty, she felt her hope had been taken away, although she had never stopped seeking answers about what happened to her daughter. Over the years, her life had changed significantly. Sabora's father passed away from illness without ever discovering the truth about his daughter. Although her efforts ultimately led to answers, they also brought a bittersweet feeling of closure. Forensic experts are continuing to analyze the evidence collected from the location where Sabora's remains were discovered. A knife found in a plastic bag has been sent for testing to check for biological traces that might connect it to Marco. At the same time, Spanish investigators are working with their Italian colleagues to gather additional materials related to Sabora's disappearance. Although there is evidence against him and he initially confessed to being involved in Sabora's death, including disclosing where her remains were located, he later took back his confession. Marco's lawyer claims that his statements were made under pressure and should not be accepted as evidence in court. Nevertheless, Investigators argue that the items found in a hidden box, including Sabora's personal belongings, give them solid grounds for pursuing further charges. The investigation into Paula's death is still active, with Marco as the main suspect. In January 2024, several months after the discovery of Sabora's remains, her family was finally able to hold a burial after all forensic examinations were completed. Her remains were returned to her loved ones in Italy, where friends and family gathered to say their final goodbyes. As a tribute, they released balloons into the sky, each carrying heartfelt messages of hope and farewell. Meanwhile, significant attention was on the ongoing legal case against Marco, who was facing charges related to Paula's death. During a hearing on January 30, 2024, Marco presented a handwritten 17-page letter admitting his responsibility for Paula's death, but he included many conditions. He stated that the conflict stemmed from ongoing arguments about shared debts and her infidelity. Marco claimed that he used excessive force in self-defense during the altercation, which led to the tragedy. Marco admitted certain things about Paula, but he was unwilling to give detailed information about Sabora's case. He confirmed that he wrapped her body in plastic, placed it in a wooden box, covered it with flowers, added lime, and sealed it in a wall. However, he insisted that he was not responsible for her death, claiming that his actions were driven by fear of the situation. During the trial, Marco changed his story about how Sabora died, providing a completely different account. He claimed that the Albanian mafia, which he said he was involved with due to debts, was the one who killed her. According to Marco, he had borrowed €25,000 to start a brothel, but the money was stolen. When he couldn't repay the debt, he said 4 men came to his house, and during an argument, one of them killed Sabora. Marco stated that he was then threatened with his own life and forced to dispose of her body to avoid more trouble. This version of events raised serious concerns among investigators because Marco had changed his statements multiple times during the investigation. It became clear that he had lied to mislead authorities. There was no evidence to support his claims of mafia involvement. An autopsy revealed that Sabora had died from multiple stab wounds, indicating a violent crime. Sabora's family finally learned the truth about her fake years after she was reported missing. Her mother, Elisabetta, shared that she had spent the last 9 years hoping for answers. By May 2024, the trial for Paula's case was in progress, and the court moved forward with a jury trial to address charges of domestic violence and homicide. Meanwhile, Sabora's case had been reopened but had not yet gone to trial, as investigators continued to examine Marco's claims. Further court proceedings were expected. The experiences of Sabora Gagani and Paula illustrate the harmful effects of relationships characterized by manipulation and abuse. Sabora had aspirations for a promising future, while Paula was working to regain control of her life. Both women were negatively impacted by the same individual. Their stories remind us of the crucial need to identify the early signs of abusive behavior and take action to prevent further harm. The will to live is not something everyone possesses. While some people remain stuck in their problems, a little girl in desperate need of help is fighting against a dangerous psychopath. But what can a child do against someone who has taken many lives? In December 1999, Crystal Searles was just 10 years old. She was known to be hardworking and humble. Despite her youth, she had already faced significant hardships. Unfortunately, what lay ahead for her was worse than anything she had ever experienced. Crystal and her brother were staying with friends of the Harris family in Del Rio, Texas, while waiting for their mother and younger sisters to move from Kansas. December 30, 1999, seemed like a normal day filled with preparations for the new year. But for some, the arrival of the new millennium was about to take a tragic turn. Mark was Crystal's brother, and they both grew up in Kansas. At that time, Mark was 7 years old and Crystal was 10. They spent the day with the children of the Harris family. Crystal and Mark were welcomed by the Harris family for a while, Crystal quickly adapted by helping with household chores and forming close bonds with everyone. During the New Year holidays, Crystal looked forward to reuniting with her mother and sisters. However, she and Mark struggled to get along, likely due to their age difference and varying interests. The Harris family had several children, with Sean as the eldest, followed by Justin, Lori, and Katie. Sean had already moved out but was planning to return for the holidays. That night, the Harris family planned to go into town to pick up Sean and the two older kids. The result is that Crystal, Katie, and Mark would be left alone at home without any adults around. The house was situated in a remote area, surrounded by nature, with few neighbors nearby. That night, little Mark was scared of the dark, wanted to sleep in the same room as the older girls, Crystal and Katie. However, they pushed him away because they wanted to share a secret. Upset, Mark had to go to the next room. It took him 2 hours to calm down and fall asleep. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room, waking Mark up. The curtains had been pulled back. When he opened his eyes, a strange woman was there. She handed him some clothes, urged him to get ready to leave. When Mark stepped out, he was shocked to find a large pool of blood on the floor, with stains and splatters on the walls and door. The floor was almost completely covered in it. People around him were crying and panicking, but Mark couldn't understand what was going on. He looked for his sister but couldn't find her or Katie. The adults ignored his questions about the girls. When detectives arrived at the house, they were immediately struck by the amount of blood present. In the room where the girls had spent the night, they found 13-year-old Katie lying on the floor, unresponsive. It was clear from her severe injuries that she had fought for her life but had ultimately succumbed to a fatal cut to her throat, resulting in blood loss. In contrast, Crystal was fortunate to have survived the attack by an unknown assailant, although she was in critical condition. At around 6 a.m. on December 31, 1999, Pam Searles, Crystal's mother, received a call. They asked for her permission to perform an emergency operation because her daughter was in critical condition with a severe throat injury. Pam was in shock and struggled to understand what had happened. Crystal quickly became an important witness for the police, even as she battled for her life in a local hospital's operating room. After a successful surgery, she was placed on life support, including a ventilator, as she was unable to breathe independently. When her mother arrived at the hospital, Crystal's condition had improved. The surgeon had managed to save her life, but her trachea and vocal cords had sustained serious injuries. Despite her state, Crystal's main concern was whether her friend Katie had survived. However, Pam did not have the strength to tell her that her friend had died. As soon as Crystal woke up after the surgery, she wanted to speak to the police to tell them what had happened. According to Crystal, she and her friend had gone to bed quite late. She had no idea what time it was when she was awakened by a scream. Raising her head from the top bunk, she saw a man with disheveled hair, a thick beard, and dark, angry eyes standing in front of her. She immediately noticed that Katie was bleeding and that this stranger had a knife in his hand. He covered Katie's mouth with his hand, slowly cutting her throat. The attacker hadn't noticed Crystal at first and was about to leave, but when Katie fell to the floor and began to make death rattles, Crystal recoiled involuntarily when their eyes met. Turning around one last time, the criminal spotted Crystal on the top bunk. Terrified, she tried to climb down to escape through the open window. With a quick movement, he caught up with her and cut her throat as well. Then the stranger disappeared from the house. Despite her injury, Crystal was able to crawl. She climbed down from the top bunk with difficulty and headed for the bedroom door. On the way, she bumped into her friend, who was still making hoarse sounds, and then went quiet. Crystal lay down next to Katie, hugged her, and wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but she couldn't. In that moment, she realized that she was mute. The criminal had severed her vocal cords. She was unable to utter a single word clearly. Suddenly, Crystal realized that she needed to ask for help. The phone was useless in her case, so she wrote a note asking for help and decided to get to the neighbors. With her throat cut, Crystal crawled out onto the terrace of the house, dressed in her pajamas and without shoes, but she saw a light in the distance, realized that it was her goal. Crystal stood up with difficulty and walked slowly toward the light. When she reached the neighboring house, which was a good distance away, she began to pound on the door. Then she heard a man's voice asking who was there. Unable to speak, she continued to knock as hard as she could until he opened the door. The neighbors saw the bloody girl, read the note, and called the police. Crystal's brother was unharmed because he had been in another room where the attacker had not entered. Based on the words of Crystal, a composite sketch was created. A check of the police database revealed several potential suspects with various convictions. The next day, the police returned to Crystal and presented several photographs for identification. Crystal confidently pointed to the image of Tommy Lynn Sells, who immediately became the prime suspect. At that time, he was in Del Rio, having arrived relatively recently. Up until that point, he had committed only minor offenses, but Crystal recognized that empty, cruel look instantly. The detectives decided to investigate him. When Tommy's door was knocked on early in the morning, he was informed that he was under arrest for murder. He came out to meet the police and immediately stated that he was glad he was finally caught because he was tired of committing these acts. Initially, the police did not grasp the alarming significance of Tommy's words. He told them about the murder weapon, which turned out to be a 30-centimeter butcher knife. He had used it often over the years, and the blade had been sharpened regularly. It had simply broken. The man had thrown the knife in the bushes near his home, where it was found with traces of blood. Tommy was taken to the county sheriff's office. From the beginning, he willingly cooperated with the authorities, confessed without hesitation to the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. He was surprised when he learned about the surviving girl. Tommy agreed to reconstruct the events in the house where he had killed Katie. His behavior seemed odd considering the terrible crimes being discussed. At the same time, he was clearly sealing his own fate by cooperating with the authorities. Tommy began to recount the details of the night of the crime. He explained that as soon as he approached the house, he noticed the open window, which made it easier for him to enter. He walked down the hallway, saw different children sleeping in various rooms, and then chose one with a bunk bed. He entered quietly, approached the lower bunk. Tommy began stabbing and cut Katie's throat. Before leaving, he noticed the second girl and also cut her throat. The detectives managed to find out he had been friends with the Harris family for a long time. It was suspected that, based on this relationship, he had planned the attack on Katie in advance, likely intending to abuse her. Tommy did indeed abuse Katie first, then killed her because he was thirsty for blood. Before arriving at the Harris house, he had intended to break into a trailer where 6 people lived. He knew them and wanted to kill them all, but he feared they might fight back, so he changed his mind at the last moment, sought easier prey. He had heard that the Harris family was hosting a couple of children and that they might be alone that night. Crystal's mother felt guilty for not being there for her daughter during such a terrible time in her life, but she had been forced to settle various issues before moving. To better understand what had happened, she expressed a desire to visit the crime scene. Upon arriving, she witnessed a scene that resembled a horror movie, with an entire floor covered in blood. Crystal had run for help with her last strength, leaving bloody handprints on the wall. Immediately after his arrest, Tommy behaved quite calmly. He was being transported to prison when he shocked the law enforcement officers by suggesting that they probably wanted to know about all the other murders he had committed. This surprised all the police officers, especially since they hadn't even asked him about other possible crimes before. Detectives usually avoid allowing journalists to be present during interrogations, as this could lead to important information being widely publicized and having unpredictable consequences. However, this time, the situation was serious. There were numerous murders involved. Ultimately, the decision was made to allow the media to participate in the interviews, which would quickly spread Tommy's story across the country, potentially help find people who had also survived his attacks and could identify their assailant. A reliable journalist, trusted by the police, was chosen for this purpose and was able to convey Tommy's story clearly, without distortion. The journalist sat in the interrogation room for hours, listening to Tommy recount stories of his life, describing his journeys from state to state while killing men, women, and children without remorse. He was a cold-blooded madman, recounting real bloody scenes as if they were made-up campfire horror stories. Among the most vivid childhood memories that Tommy shared was his father's phrase, "Dead men don't talk." From the start, he doubted that any of his victims could have survived the attack. In his opinion, Crystal was very lucky, but it was unlikely that anyone else had been so fortunate. Even at this stage, the extent of his madness was unclear. Over the next 9 months, he communicated regularly with detectives in the presence of a journalist. In total, he described 22 murders that he committed with his own hands. There were other unconfirmed incidents that could not be verified. Clearly, many more crimes had been committed. This man's words were corroborated by his knife, which he had used all these years to take the lives of innocents. The blade had been sharpened so many times that it became very thin and resembled a slate. The butcher knife didn't even look like a kitchen tool, it resembled something from a torture chamber. After all these events, surgeries, discharge, talking to detectives and journalists, Crystal was gradually recovering. She was shocked by the extent of her injuries. A long scar remained on her throat after the surgery, and she cried when she saw it for the first time. Her mother took her to Kansas, away from the scene of the massacre, but they still had to return to Texas for her to testify against the serial killer. 9 months had passed since the murder and attempted murder. Tommy's stories about other crimes had ended. Crystal was 11 years old by this point. She managed to partially recover, but only physically. Psychologically, she continued to struggle with the consequences of the horrors she had witnessed, as well as the cruelty of the madman she now had to testify against in court. She was the main witness for the prosecution. From the very beginning, the situation was tense. Crystal had not seen the criminal since the night he slit her friend's throat before her eyes, almost killing her. It was hard for everyone caught up in Tommy's villainy. During the hearings in Texas, Crystal was taken in by Texas Ranger Johnny Allen, who was a family man with 2 children at the time. Crystal met their daughters, hoping that this would help distract her from her situation. According to the family, Crystal would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thrashing around in bed as if trying to escape from someone. Everyone knew this was what her nightmares were about, but the girl was determined not to give up. Tommy's lawyer also had a difficult task ahead of him. He knew all too well that his client was a dangerous serial criminal who had taken dozens of lives for no reason. His only strategy was to try to avoid capital punishment. He was not going to deny the charges. Despite the adults' concerns, Crystal even spoke enthusiastically about the upcoming meeting with Tommy. She understood that now he would not have a chance to attack her, so she was not afraid. She simply wanted to achieve a fair punishment for this monster. Crystal comforted herself with the thought that she was the reason he was caught and that she had stopped the chain of murders at his hands. According to the prosecutor's office, if Crystal had not miraculously survived that attack and pointed out Tommy, he would have continued his bloody spree across the United States. Who knows how many more people could have died from his knife? The courageous schoolgirl thought that by doing this, she was pursuing justice and vengeance for her friend who had been killed. Up until the day of her testimony, Crystal felt very inspired. That morning, she woke up to find her mother so worried that she was in tears. She asked her mother to calm down so that she wouldn't be distracted from this important moment that could help them stop the serial killer. During the hearings, Crystal once again demonstrated her fortitude. She walked to the stand when called to testify, passing mere centimeters away from the criminal. Although she could have chosen to enter through a specially prepared secret door for such cases, she expressed a desire to walk past the assailant who had cut her throat. She stated that she was not afraid of the man. At one point, however, her determination wavered slightly. While Crystal was on the stand, Tommy displayed no panic, nervousness, or tears. He didn't even look at her while she spoke and answered questions. Crystal confirmed that it was this man who had slit her and her friend's throats, pointing at him. Conversely, he appeared to be impatiently waiting for a decision, which made Crystal increasingly nervous. Eventually, the tension overwhelmed her. She burst into tears and could no longer speak. The court took a forced 15-minute break to allow the prosecution's main witness to compose herself. After the break, Crystal returned to her previous resolve, showing the jury her scar across her throat, a mark that the defendant had left on her body for the rest of her life. Then there was a demonstration of the attack. Crystal lay on a makeshift table that was meant to represent a bed, showing how the attacker had stabbed her with a knife. This allowed the jury to comprehend the scale of the cruelty and horror that the child had endured. The girl illustrated how she had tried to cover her throat with her hands, having witnessed what Tommy had done to her friend, not wanting to share the same fate. Perhaps this instinct is what saved her from a fatal hemorrhage that could have killed her within minutes. The courage of the 11-year-old schoolgirl was acknowledged by her lawyer. Instead of cross-examining her, the defense attorney praised her and did not ask a single question. At that moment, it became clear that even a serial killer's defense attorney was on the side of the victims. No one expected the trial to be so short, especially in such a high-profile case. However, the jury returned with a verdict after about an hour of deliberation. They found the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. Now only one question remained: would he receive life in prison or the death penalty? The final stage of the trial was set. No one suspected that the brave little girl sitting in front of everyone actually harbored other secrets. Mark Searles, Crystal's father, believed he understood why his daughter had such a strong, determined character, which enabled her to confront this monster. He was convinced that she simply knew what to do. According to Mark, he and Pam began using illegal substances 5 years before these tragic events. He claimed that the addiction quickly took over subjecting them to a tumultuous cycle of attempting to recover and then falling back into addiction. They began to quarrel more frequently, and things spiraled out of control. Mark got into serious legal trouble, which only worsened over time. Meanwhile, Pam desperately sought to restore her normal life, distance herself from anything related to illegal activities. Ultimately, she filed for divorce, focused on overcoming her addiction. Pam got herself together and concentrated on her children. However, years earlier, Crystal had assumed the role of caretaker, as she was the eldest girl in the family. She recalled a time when her parents were dependent, how her father could sleep all day without regaining consciousness. As a result, she was forced to care for her younger siblings. Naturally, she also attended school. Despite her young age, the schoolgirl began to grasp the harsh realities of life. She became a reliable support for her mother, changed her sisters' diapers, fed them, put them to bed, prepared for school in the mornings, and even cooked her own meals. By her own admission, Crystal felt like the unluckiest girl in her class, as others did not face such struggles. Crystal was never driven to or picked up from school, nor did she receive help. Of course, this situation seemed unjust. On the other hand, would she have been able to ask for help if not for the independence forced upon her in her early years? According to her sisters, during that time, Crystal took on the responsibilities of both her mother and father, with many not even knowing what her parents looked like because she shouldered almost all of the family responsibilities. Crystal remembered the moment her mother, Pam, decided to end it all. Pam managed to quit and gradually return to a normal life. However, from her recollections, her father remained entrenched in criminal circles. He could not quit, and many believed he didn't even try. By Mark's own admission, he couldn't stop using and selling banned substance, finding himself drawn into criminal schemes, fearing that leaving that lifestyle would be a dangerous decision. After Pam and the children moved out, Mark was arrested a few months later. Pam felt relieved to have left him, as staying with him might have jeopardized her dreams of a new life. He ended up in jail because of his criminal connections. His daughters was so angry with him that she simply stopped answering his calls, blaming him for choosing illegal substances over family. Mark he learned about the attack on his daughter. At that moment, he was behind bars and could not help her in any way. At the time of the attack, Mark was serving a sentence for the sale and possession of illegal substances. He was in prison for about 3 months. Suddenly, at 10 a.m., an unexpected visit occurred, as it was outside the permitted visiting hours. The matter was urgent. His mother and sister came to inform him about what had happened to Crystal. Emotions ran high. If he had not been incarcerated, he would have torn Tommy apart with his own hands. Naturally, this didn't change much. Mark couldn't change anything, not even be present in court to support his daughter. But at that moment, something shifted in him. He rethought his life, which had brought his daughter to that house on that fateful night. If it weren't for his problems, no one would have attacked Crystal. Meanwhile, there was one main issue to be resolved: determining what punishment the serial killer would receive for the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. Pam had wanted the death penalty for the attacker from the very beginning. Crystal initially supported this decision, but gradually she concluded that she did not want to become like that creature who thirsted for blood. She advocated for a life sentence instead. However, compared to crimes, the prosecutor's office demanded the death penalty. The jury supported this initiative. In the end, Tommy was sentenced to death. The court believed that this would allow him to atone not only for Katie and Crystal but for all of his other victims. He eluded authorities for 20 years and was finally stopped thanks to a brave schoolgirl. Tommy Lynn Sells was born in Oakland, California, on June 28, 1964, one of 5 children of a single mother. He hardly knew his father. Tommy's sister fell ill and died when she was only 1.5 years old. After that, he was sent to live with his aunt, where he behaved poorly. He was returned to his mother, who did not want him. By the age of 7, Tommy had begun to drink alcohol and soon became the victim of abuse by an adult man. From the age of 10, he became addicted to banned substance and troubled his grandmother. All family members began to fear him, eventually kicked him out of the house. From the age of 14, Tommy began to wander. When he was 17, he found his mother and began to molest her in the shower. He was placed in a psychiatric clinic, where he was diagnosed with several disorders, including bipolar disorder. However, the treatment did not help. His condition worsened due to alcohol and substance abuse. According to Tommy, he committed his first murder at 15, on July 5, 1979, in Port Gibson, Mississippi, when he shot and killed 39-year-old John Kay during a home invasion. Witnesses described a suspect who resembled Tommy. The violence escalated from there. The next attack occurred on April 27, 1982, in St. Louis, Missouri, when 35-year-old Joanne Tate, 35, was abused and murdered in her home. Notably, another man had already been convicted and was serving time for this crime, but he was later exonerated. Tommy committed several murders of single mothers with children, breaking into their homes at night, kidnapping the children from their homes, abusing, and killing them in various ways. The style of each crime was different, so detectives did not see a connection between the attacks. The criminal did not spare anyone, even small children. Sometimes he would meet a future victim, gain her trust, enter her house, then kill her and her children. Tommy's most horrific murder was the attack on the Dardine family, where he killed 4 people at once. On November 17, 1987, while hitchhiking, he was picked up by 29-year-old Keith Dardine, who kindly brought him home for dinner. But instead of gratitude, Tommy shot Keith and then beat his 3-year-old son to death. He then proceeded to assault the pregnant wife of the homeowner, who gave birth to a baby girl during the attack. He killed both the wife and the newborn. Tommy's last known crime was the attack on Kathy and Crystal. For some of the 22 established murders, he received life sentences in various states. For others, he was never convicted, believing that the death penalty would suffice. Despite the fact that Crystal had defeated a serial killer, she had mixed feelings. She did not feel joy at the upcoming execution of Tommy, as she had never been the kind of person who indulged in such things, no matter who the perpetrator was. However, she did not challenge the verdict. Now, Crystal faced a much harder and longer struggle. Her parents were confident that she would cope with the consequences of the attack. Her mother and sisters rallied around her, even sleeping together in the same bed to provide support. Unfortunately, this did not always allow Crystal to rest fully. At times, she could spend an entire night without blinking, staring at the closed window of her room. By her own admission, during such moments, she thought about her escape routes in case of an attack. If the criminal entered through that window, she knew to run out through the other one. And if he entered through the door, she also knew how to hide quickly. In addition, it was important for Crystal to know that her loved ones were nearby. The girl felt reassured simply by the fact that her mother and sisters were alive and breathing. She could sense it. Gradually, Crystal began to regain her sense of self. Her father, Mark, spent 3 years behind bars. When he was released, he immediately sought to improve his relationship with his daughter, who had miraculously survived the attack of a serial killer. He understood that she needed support and help. She saw her father on the right path, even attending her graduation. However, Crystal felt that the relationship with her father was still a struggle. Their relationship continued to improve gradually, and both looked at it positively. Crystal was in a mentally difficult situation. It was not easy for her to feel joy despite an unconditional victory while her friend had died. Gradually, she returned to her usual life and became like a mother to the younger members of the family. Later, she spoke repeatedly with journalists, sharing that she cannot psychologically develop trust in people. Because of this, she has difficulties with relationships, although she genuinely wants to build a family. Nevertheless, Crystal still believes in the best. She even saw her father cope, quit crime and addiction, gradually make up for lost time. She is now 35 years old. Crystal is close to her family and constantly remembers her friend who was killed before her eyes. The events of that terrible night remain etched in her memory. Little is known about her personal life at the moment. On January 3, 2014, a judge set Tommy's execution date. The death sentence by lethal injection was carried out on April 3, 2014, at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Crystal and members of the Harris family were present at the execution. In the Italian province of Bergamo, the municipality of Cologno al Sirios has around 10,000 residents. Femicides are a significant concern here, with many women being harmed by their former or current partners. In 2019, Zinaida Solinari, a 36-year-old woman originally from a small village in Moldova, was living in Cologno al Sirios. She had resided in Italy for nearly 15 years and had made some progress toward achieving her dreams. Like many young women who leave their home countries in search of a better life, Zinaida aimed to establish herself abroad. She arrived in Italy in 2004 at the age of 21, hoping to find employment and eventually a husband to create a happy life. Right after moving to Bergamo, Zinaida began her new life and work. She was a vibrant and attractive young woman who received a lot of attention from men, but she was not looking for a short-term fling. She wanted to find a husband. A few years later, she met a man named Maurizio Quattrochi, who was 11 years older than her. He appeared trustworthy and kind. She was immediately drawn to him. It's important to mention that Zinaida lived with her daughter, whom she had at the age of 16. At the time of their move, her daughter was 5 years old. Maurizio welcomed her daughter as if she were his own and later adopted her. Zinaida hadn't yet made many friends in Bergamo. From the start, Maurizio treated her and her daughter beautifully, offering a sense of security that won Zinaida over. They began a relationship that quickly became serious. Maurizio was a painter and bricklayer with a troubled past that included several criminal offenses, which he chose not to share with Zinaida, a fact she later discovered. He had been convicted multiple times for buying stolen property and had several instances of driving under the influence. Despite this history, he treated Zinaida and her daughter with great care. In late 2004, they married. The following year they welcomed their first daughter, with a second daughter arriving 4 years later. Maurizio was dedicated to his family, but he had a fiery temperament. Zinaida affectionately called him a hot Italian, believing it to be part of his charm. She worked to smooth over any tensions. For many years, their relationship appeared loving and understanding. However, beneath the surface, there were troubling issues. Zinaida's family soon learned about Mauricio's bad temper. He was impulsive and aggressive. His jealousy began to strain their relationship, particularly after Zinaida took a job as a waitress at a popular restaurant in mid-2019. Maurizio was unhappy with her job because many men frequented the restaurant, and his financial struggles heightened his jealousy. Especially as Zenaida's salary allowed her more independence, made her the family's primary earner. At the restaurant, Zenaida met a woman who was also from Eastern Europe. They discovered they had a lot in common. Her colleagues soon noticed the tension between Zenaida and her husband, Maurizio. During Zenaida's first week at her new job, Maurizio came to the restaurant because she hadn't answered his calls. He raised his voice at her, and her colleague could see that Zenaida flinched at every loud sound, revealing her fear of her husband. After that incident, Zenaida shared with her colleague that Maurizio was jealous, upset because she had become more independent and had slipped out of his control. Despite this, Zenaida was determined to stand her ground, not give in to his demands, so she continued working at the restaurant, hoping that her husband would eventually adjust and stop pressuring her. The situation was worsening, seemed to be getting out of control. Her colleague noticed that after several months of working at the restaurant, Zenaida had lost a significant amount of weight and appeared very anxious, which was quite concerning. Zenaida usually dealt with her problems on her own, seldom talked about her life. However, it was clear that her marriage was failing. After 13 years, Zenaida realized it was time for a change. She understood how dangerous her husband was after a fight that occurred just before the tragedy. Unfortunately, she didn't have time to respond. Around 2 a.m. on October 6, 2019, the city police received a report about a woman who had been injured. When officers arrived at Via Alberto de Giussano, it was too late to help her. She had already died. The woman was 36-year-old Zenaida Solinari. Police quickly interviewed her family and friends. Zenaida was found in the courtyard of her sister Oksana Solinari's house, where she had been living recently. Oksana had moved to Italy after Zenaida, and her life had been more settled since marrying Lucio Carlo Di Dio. Oksana informed the police about the difficulties Zenaida faced in her marriage. She believed the event was a result of Mauricio's ongoing aggressive behavior. Just before the tragedy, Zenaida had made the decision to leave her husband, believing it was her only option after a recent family conflict. In private, Zenaida confided in Oksana that Maurizio had threatened her, saying if she tried to leave, he would kill her and then take his own life. From that point, Zenaida understood that the man she thought was her protector could actually be a serious threat to her safety. She shared her experiences of aggression, physical abuse, and how she had to call the police after her last fight with Maurizio. At that time, Zenaida had 3 children, but her husband was indifferent and consumed by jealousy. He was behaving violently, and it was only when the police arrived that he calmed down. Although Zenaida chose not to file formal charges against him, she spoke to the police out of fear for her safety. She thought that moving out of the house was the best way to protect herself and her children. After leaving, she hoped Maurizio would eventually calm down so they could officially get divorced. However, Zenaida did not recognize that the period when a woman tries to escape the control of an abusive partner is often the most dangerous time, both during the decision to separate and the act of leaving. Zenaida opened up to several friends about her husband's frequent episodes of intense jealousy. She shared that he not only yelled at her but also physically assaulted her. However, when speaking with detectives, she did not mention the threats of violence. She minimized the severity of her situation, claiming that her husband had never physically harmed her until mid-2019, despite his aggressive demeanor and constant emotional pressure. Zenaida believed she could manage her circumstances alone. Just 2 hours before she was murdered, a patrol of carabinieri drove by her sister's house. Oksana was aware that Maurizio was searching for his wife. He had come to visit her that evening and hadn't been seen since. Concerned for safety, Oksana called the police. The carabinieri checked the area but left without finding anything suspicious. Later that evening, Oksana's husband mentioned seeing a car that looked like Mauricio's parked in a dead end, but they could not locate its owner. If the police officers had been more vigilant, they might have noticed something amiss and potentially prevent the crime. Maurizio Quattrochi was 47 years old, had a history of a bad temper. Recently, he lost his job as a bricklayer, a position he had held for several years. This wasn't the first instance of him being fired. He was previously let go from his job as a cook at a pizzeria due to conflicts with management. Although Maurizio had always been aggressive, Zinaida usually managed to calm him down. However, after losing his job, his anger intensified. He struggled with the pressure of not being able to support his family, which only added to his irritation, especially towards Zinaida's accomplishments. On the evening of October 5th, he was waiting for Zinaida to return home while intoxicated. Just days earlier, Zinaida and her children had moved in with her sister, Oksana, seeking refuge without revealing her plans. She felt there were no other options for support and thought that staying with her sister would allow the children to continue going to their previous school. Zinaida also underestimated the likelihood of Maurizio acting on his threats. She wanted to avoid causing additional stress for their children. The next day after Zinaida moved out, Maurizio quickly found her at his relative's house. They had another uncomfortable conversation, but this time Zinaida chose not to involve the police. She wanted to prevent anyone else from getting hurt and still hoped that Maurizio, with whom she had spent 13 years, would act rationally. Sadly, he had started to see her as an object, making rationality unlikely. Tragically, Zinaida was found outside her sister's house with several stab wounds, some of which were life-threatening. The attacker had cut her throat and stabbed her in the chest, leading to severe blood loss. She died before the ambulance could reach her. At that moment, her 3 daughters were asleep just a few meters away from their mother. When the carabinieri arrived, Maurizio was already gone, having fled the scene of the crime. However, Zinaida's sister had important information about him. Oksana, who was close to her sister, knew details about Mauricio's job, his favorite hangouts, and his car. Her husband, Lucio, noted that an old Peugeot 206 was parked in an alley and that car drove away in it right after the attack. Witnesses provided the police with the vehicle's license plate, allowing them to start the search for him immediately. The police first searched Mauricio's house but found no one there. They then checked his previous workplaces but found them empty as well. He had gone on the run, but there were only a few possible escape routes. The carabinieri were pursuing the suspect and were closing in. However, they worried he might abandon his car and hide in the wilderness. The police monitored checkpoints and cameras along the potential escape paths. Maurizio was quickly located, and a large-scale operation was planned to capture him. They set up checkpoints on the road and stopped cars that matched his description. Despite this, Maurizio managed to briefly slip through the barrier. His escape lasted just under 16 hours. Eventually, a man matching his description was seen walking along the road, several hundred kilometers from the murder scene. Surprisingly, he hadn't traveled far from Oksana's house, as if he was unsure of what to do and was aimlessly wandering while trying to come up with a plan. He was stopped and arrested at the city entrance. The alleged criminal was taken to Treviglio station, charged with first-degree murder, and sent to prison in Bergamo. At this point, Maurizio claimed that Zinaida's death was accidental, insisting he never wanted to hurt his beloved wife. However, her sister, Oksana, reminded him of his earlier threats to kill Zinaida. Oksana was aware that Maurizio had long suspected Zinaida of cheating, frequently accusing her of having affairs with other men, even though there was no truth to those claims. She firmly believed that Zinaida had remained faithful in their marriage, but Maurizio was not convinced. The situation may have worsened due to Mauricio's job loss and Zinaida's newfound independence. She recognized that their family was struggling and that they needed money for basic necessities. Taking a job at a restaurant was her way of supporting herself, her husband, and their children. Unbeknownst to her, this decision stirred intense anger in Maurizio. Rather than being encouraging, he grew increasingly jealous and resentful. His behavior could have been exacerbated by the depression often linked to such issues, but this did not lessen his guilt. Mauricio's behavior was similar to stalking. Maurizio bombarded Zinaida with constant work calls, which severely affected her ability to perform her job. He insisted on constant contact, even asked for photos to prove where she was, what she was doing, and who she was with. Her employer noticed her frequent distractions and advised her to turn off her mobile phone, hoping this would alleviate the situation with her husband. Unfortunately, this only made things worse. Rather than stop his interference, Maurizio started arriving at the restaurant and causing dramatic scenes. Each time, his behavior became more concerning. All these incidents were verified by a friend of Zinaida, whom she met at the restaurant. Although Zinaida preferred not to complain, she shared with her sister that she was overwhelmed by ongoing scandals at home. After long days at work, she would return to face constant accusations of infidelity and jealousy-driven arguments. Trying to defend herself felt pointless. By the end of summer 2019, she experienced physical violence at home for the first time. Instead of addressing their problems and looking for a job, Maurizio turned to drinking, which led to conflicts, left her with bruises. After interviewing the suspect, detectives determined that jealousy was the motive behind this act of femicide. They investigated Mauricio's background to confirm the statements made by Zinaida's relatives and friends. He seemed to be a typical manipulator who was losing control over Zinaida. After losing his last job due to a conflict with his boss, he could only find odd jobs that didn't provide enough income to support the family. This situation led him to alcoholism and increasingly abusive behavior. In contrast, Zinaida was working as a waitress and occasionally as a hotel maid. She also earned extra income through modeling. It became clear that she no longer needed this relationship. From what was known, Maurizio spoke negatively about Zinaida's modeling career, convinced that it was linked to other men, leading him to believe that she was unfaithful. Although he could not find any evidence to support this, he was equally unable to convince his spouse otherwise. After the Carabinieri were first called due to a domestic dispute involving threats, they assessed Mauricio's behavior and advised Zinaida to move out. It was generally accepted that her refusal to file a complaint contributed to her death. Maurizio continued to assert that his attack was unintentional, claiming he simply wanted to talk to his wife and that she was the one who first exhibited aggression. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation contradicted these assertions. Zinaida had remained calm, diffusing all hostility, and consistently tried to avoid conflict. In contrast, everyone who knew Maurizio well described him as extraordinarily aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling. The fact that the Carabinieri could not find him during their patrol confirmed suspicions that he had set up an ambush and was in hiding. He possessed a kitchen knife, which became the weapon used in the murder. It could not have ended up in his hands by chance. He had taken it with him intentionally, having planned to confront Zinaida from the very beginning. According to the reconstruction of events, late on Saturday evening, Zinaida was returning home from a night shift at the restaurant. The last message she received from her loved ones was a warning. Around midnight, Oksana wished her sister a safe journey and advised her to be careful. When speaking to the police, Oksana expressed that she had a bad feeling, which is why she wrote this message to Zinaida. She had no idea that the future killer was already waiting for his victim outside the house. Zinaida barely managed to stop near the gate of Oksana's house and got out of her car. She had walked only 3 meters when Maurizio attacked her with a kitchen knife, striking her several times with force. However, Zinaida did not lose consciousness. Instead, she began to scream. This noise awakened her neighbors and her sister, who called for help. Unfortunately, the criminal had enough time to inflict a fatal wound on his victim. Even after the neighbors raised a ruckus, he continued the attack, unable to control the anger fueled by jealousy. Realizing what had happened, Maurizio jumped into his car and began to flee. However, this reckless escape was ill-conceived, as there was nowhere for him to hide. The day of Zinaida Solinari's funeral was declared the day of mourning in the city. This tragic news shocked not only the numerous members of the city's Moldovan community but also all other residents. Flags were lowered, and many local establishments were closed. A memorial service was held, attended by an Orthodox priest from Bergamo. Hundreds of concerned citizens came to the church for the vigil, all appalled by the tragic fate of this kind and beautiful woman. White flowers lay on the white coffin, and red ribbons, a symbol of the fight against femicide, were tied at the feet of local residents. Red roses were placed around a fountain in the main square, and candles were lit. Meanwhile, the suspect remained defiant. His story changed several times, resulting in no one believing him anymore. During another interrogation, Maurizio claimed that the meeting was simply to communicate with his wife. After consuming a considerable amount of alcohol, he insisted that he felt a surge of jealousy, which had become increasingly frequent. Throughout the day, he had contacted his wife. Even if Maurizio genuinely wanted to know what his wife was doing that evening, the response did not satisfy him. He attacked her while checking her mobile phone. The Carabinieri discovered that earlier that evening, at about 6 p.m., Oksana had informed her that Maurizio had come to her house looking to see his children. Naturally, Zinaida refused, as she immediately noticed that he was drunk. She told him he could only see his daughters the next day when he had sobered up. This likely intensified Mauricio's jealousy, suggesting that he may have been lying in wait near the house for several hours before attacking his victim. Initially, Maurizio insisted that it was all an accident, then claimed he did not remember anything. His final explanation was that he did not want to kill Zinaida but was unable to control himself due to jealousy. His lies did not clarify whether he had truly been waiting there all that time with a knife or if he had left and returned after the Carabinieri had checked the area. Maurizio maintained that he could not recall anything because of the alcohol he had consumed and even denied bringing a knife with him, claiming he could have found it near his sister Zinaida's house. During interrogations, he also stated that his wife loved him, that she did not deserve such an end, that he believed until the very end that they could be together again and everything would work out. Oksana and Lucio countered this claim, stating that it was a lie. Zinaida had fled because she was afraid of him, felt under constant pressure and control. At the hearing, one of the first to speak was her sister, 32-year-old Oksana. She recounted how she heard a muffled cry for help in her sleep. Instinctively, she felt it was Zinaida. Upon opening her eyes, she heard it again and realized she was right. She immediately woke her husband, and together they rushed into the street, where they saw Maurizio. The attack was ongoing. He was holding Zinaida by the throat, striking her repeatedly. The prosecutor's office rightly labeled this act an extreme form of cruelty, as the criminal was completely out of control. Even in front of witnesses, the assault continued. This brutal act left 3 children without a mother and father. Oksana's words were substantiated by her husband, Lucio, his brother, Alessandro, and her neighbor, Riccardo Passini. They all witnessed the moment of the attack but did not have time to intervene. Everything happened too quickly. When they approached, Maurizio fled. Zinaida's 18-year-old daughter, Vitalia, also participated in the trial. Mauricio's 2 youngest daughters, aged 9 and 13, were not present in the courtroom. They did not want to interact with their father, who had left them orphaned. The girls were placed in Oksana's care. During the hearing, a forensic expert testified that he found 18 wounds on Zinaida's body. 3 of these wounds were inflicted on her face and were identified as defensive injuries on the victim's arms. Another 8 wounds were located on her neck, indicating that this was likely the target area of the killer, as his actions did not correspond with typical unintentional murder. One of the most dangerous blows punctured the aorta at the base of her neck, resulting in severe bleeding. Just a few minutes later, Zinaida lost consciousness and subsequently died. Her relatives held her in their arms during her final moments as she faded before their eyes, bleeding to death until the rescue service arrived. Her last words were, "I can't breathe anymore." Only after hearing her last words did he decide to flee. At that moment, a kitchen knife fell to the ground, which was later found by the police. The prosecution insisted that the attack was premeditated, as the knife found matched one from Mauricio's kitchen set, which was missing from his home. The lawyer tried to justify the defendant in an implausible manner, claiming that he had found a blade near his sister Zinaida's house. Despite this, Mauricio's lawyer continued to advocate for a mitigated sentence and insisted on a psychiatric examination. According to the lawyer, there had been a systematic deterioration in Mauricio's mental state, which became apparent several days before the crime. On that day, Zinaida stated that he had become obsessive, possessive, and much more aggressive than usual. Just before the incident, Zinaida told her sister that her husband had tried to strangle her with a belt from a robe. When Oksana's husband came to help with a move, he noticed that Zinaida's internet cables had been cut, which seemed strange. Furthermore, Maurizio took her mobile phone, indicating that the situation was spiraling out of control. The lawyer believed these were signs of mental problems. However, the relatives of Zinaida did not want to allow the killer to receive a lenient sentence due to claims of insanity. Oksana claimed that her sister had considered breaking up 8 years before the tragedy. Oksana said Zinaida felt like a victim and was afraid that her husband could be dangerous, but she stayed in the relationship for the sake of their children. Zinaida's relatives said she described a miserable 10-year marriage. Maurizio ended his own life, as he had promised, while in custody during the trial. His lawyer commented on his client's death. The hearing shocked Maurizio. He could not bear the shame and disgrace, especially since some aspects, according to him, did not correspond to reality. He was particularly taken aback by witness testimonies that described 10 years of torment, during which his wife had suffered and was denied a divorce. Maurizio expressed regret for his actions but realized he could not turn back time to alter the circumstances of his wife's death. He feared that his daughters would be compelled to testify against him, which would have been an even greater blow. Consequently, Maurizio decided to end his life. He left several suicide notes for his family, but their contents remain unknown. The brutal murder of Zinaida Solinari on October 6, 2019, in Cologno al Sirios marked a devastating loss for her family and the community. Fleeing an abusive marriage, Zinaida sought refuge with her sister Oksana days earlier, hoping to protect her 3 daughters. Her courage to reclaim her independence triggered Maurizio Quattroci's jealousy, culminating in a premeditated attack that ended her life. The court's focus on the crime's brutality underscored the gravity of femicide, a persistent issue in Bergamo, where women like Zinaida face danger from intimate partners. Zinaida's story is a stark reminder of the urgent need for stronger protections and awareness to prevent such tragedies, ensuring no woman pays the ultimate price for seeking freedom. Kitzbühel is a small Austrian town located, with a population of just over 8,000 people. Despite its size, more than 20,000 tourists visit every winter, drawn by the local mountain slopes. For many decades, this place has been known as a winter resort for the wealthy. Additionally, there are numerous celebrations that attract athletes and fans from around the world. Since October 2018, the ski slopes have been prepared before the winter season. The hotels and tourism companies have been making the final preparations to welcome numerous guests. However, the joyful events were overshadowed by the horrific murders. Nadine Hinterholzer was born in Austria, grew up in a close-knit family. From an early age, she was energetic, cheerful, and quite pretty. She had a large circle of friends who loved her for her straightforwardness, good sense of humor, and pleasant demeanor. Nadine lived with her parents and older brother in a spacious house in Kitzbühel. At the age of 14, significant changes began in her life when she met a guy named Andreas E., who was 20 at the time. He already looked like an adult, while she was still a teenager. A 6-year age difference at that age can seem significant. Despite this, they felt a mutual attraction. After several dates, they began a romantic relationship in secret from Nadine's relatives. Eventually, they both realized that age could pose the greatest obstacle in their relationship. Nadine was concerned that her older boyfriend could face legal issues because of his involvement with a minor, but they were reluctant to break up. At first, Nadine carefully hinted to her parents about the significant changes in her life, which raised some alarms for her mother and father. However, Andreas was determined and decided to take a bold step. He personally approached Nadine's family to seek permission for their relationship. From the beginning, he emphasized that this was not a fleeting affair. He wanted to build a future with her but did not want to rush her, allowing her to finish school and pursue her education. Andreas was familiar with her brother, Kevin. Soon after meeting, they became close friends. During home visits, Andreas's initiative was highly appreciated by Nadine's parents, especially after she described him as well-mannered, polite, and loving. Overall, the family liked Andreas, so they permitted Nadine to continue their relationship. Nadine had just entered the challenging teenage years. Her parents believed that a relationship with an older boyfriend could positively influence her, as he could take care of her and protect her from unpleasant situations. Andreas acted as though Nadine meant a lot to him, growing closer to her family. Initially, they spent all their free time together, and after 3 years, Andreas moved in with them. Nadine and Andreas posted statuses on social media indicating their engagement. While Andreas had intentions of getting married, he respected Nadine's desires to finish school and make her own life decisions before rushing into marriage. They continued dating for several years, to the point where Nadine's family began to treat Andreas like their own son. Finally, Nadine turned 18, officially becoming an adult, while Andreas was already 24. They decided it was time to move out and live independently. Nadine's grandmother significantly assisted them by offering her apartment for Nadine and Andreas to settle in. By this time, Nadine had completed her schooling. She intended to continue her studies at college. She did not plan on marriage or children, which disappointed Andreas slightly, as she wanted to establish herself first. Nadine enrolled in driving school and attended classes with her friends, who often picked her up. She aspired to become a professional dancer and build a career in this field. To their relatives, Nadine and Andreas represented the epitome of romance. Although the age difference made their relationship seem unconventional, it was evident that their bond was built on love and mutual understanding. It seemed as though their lives were just beginning, with no threats on the horizon. Andreas had faced Nadine's transitional phase early in their relationship when she was just 14, and they had managed to cope with that difficult period, maintaining, even strengthening their bond. However, after she reached adulthood, some other challenges began to emerge in their relationship. Andreas was seriously determined to pursue further development, family life, and children, but he could not achieve the same aspirations from his beloved. A 24-year-old man, he worked as a bricklayer and spent the lion's share of his time, energy on his job. Upon returning home in the evening, he just wanted to relax with his girlfriend in their apartment, but this did not meet the new needs of an 18-year-old. While she had already become an adult, she still wanted to relax, spend time with friends, and go to parties. Previously, they had constantly gone out together, but now Andreas wanted to spend time at home in front of the TV, which was too boring for Nadine. Initially, she managed to persuade him to go for walks or spend time outside their home, but over time, this became nearly impossible. Andreas began to refuse such outings, citing fatigue and stating that he had to work in the morning. He complained that he wanted to relax and recharge but felt unsupported by her. During this period, the age difference between them became particularly apparent. Nadine was at the peak of her activity and craved entertainment, while she realized that Andreas had already moved past that phase of life, who now had other interests. However, she was not willing to adjust to him or give in. She wanted to live the life of a young woman, socialize, and have fun with her friends. All of this led to conflicts beginning to arise between them. Nadine even told Andreas that if this continued, she would have to break up with him. Despite her repeatedly expressing this not only to him but also to her friends and relatives, he did not take her words seriously. He saw no reason for a breakup, insisting that he still loved her, hoped she would calm down over time and everything would return to normal. He continued planning a lavish wedding, believing it was the right time since their relationship had lasted for 5 years. He wanted to change his social media status from engaged to married, but her insistence on remaining single, along with her constant reproaches and talk of breaking up, loomed over their relationship. Andreas increasingly became intrusive and rude. Nadine felt that he simply wanted to control her completely and grew angry that he could not succeed. She even began to tell her friends that they had always had problems that she had kept silent about. In the summer of 2018, Nadine made the firm decision to break up, but she did not want any conflict. She hoped they could maintain a friendly relationship. At that time, she was 19 years old, and Andreas was already 25. According to Nadine, her boyfriend was never cruel or aggressive and did not limit her communication with others. The major issue was his passivity and jealousy. He could not stand it when she was in the company of other guys. She even lost all her male friends after meeting Andreas at the age of 14. Nadine told her friend that they had decided to separate and live apart. She was sure that her boyfriend took it calmly. She believed their relationship was officially over after 5 years together. Nadine and Andreas stopped dating. He moved out of her grandmother's apartment and returned to his parents' house. The idea of maintaining friendly relations seemed to work as they both had mutual friends and kept in touch with their families. Andreas continued to be friends with Nadine's older brother, Kevin, as if nothing had happened. They were peers and had a lot in common. However, this was the calm before the storm. During this period, doubts began to surface during their communication. Nadine increasingly suspected that Andreas was not taking the breakup calmly. Kevin thought Andreas had accepted this as another whim of his girlfriend and was simply waiting for a signal from Nadine regarding the restoration of their relationship. The friends had discussed this many times. Andreas could not accept that it was truly over. Thoughts and conversations about his ex consumed almost all of his time. Andreas's behavior approached obsession. He seized every opportunity to communicate with Nadine, asking for a second chance, trying to win her back, even continuing to talk about marriage and children. Within the first month of the breakup, it became clear that Andreas did not understand the situation and was simply in denial. He did not realize that they were no longer a couple. Each time Nadine firmly said no, insisting that everything was over between them, she labeled their relationship as her youthful mistake, even confiding this to her other friends. All of this hurt Andreas, but he continued to endure. He still hoped for a reconciliation. Some of his friends sympathized with him, but by the end of the second month after the breakup, they too began to notice that his behavior resembled stalking. He showed up everywhere Nadine went, always initiating conversation. Andreas's persistence caused Nadine to start avoiding him. She tried to gently indicate that their relationship was over, but he only became more determined. When she tried to stop their meetings, he made efforts to interact with her. Nadine's friends and family knew that she was consistently rejecting his advances, but he was spreading different stories to his own circle. Even 2 months after the breakup, he still believed that she wanted to be with him and thought she was only trying to make him pursue her. Kevin tried to tell Andreas to move on and date other girls, but he remained stubborn. As of October 5, 2018, the situation remained unchanged. Nadine and Andreas had officially been separated for 3 months. Nadine's entire family was aware of the breakup. Even his parents tried to convince him to reconsider. That evening, Andreas spent time with Kevin. They visited several bars but didn't stay long in any of them. Eventually, they ended up at one bar, where Kevin unexpectedly saw Nadine. He found it surprising to run into her, especially since, despite the town being small, there were enough bars catering to tourists that it was unlikely they would see each other regularly. Andreas appeared to either be following Nadine, receiving updates on her location, or simply searching for her as he moved between various places throughout the evening. Kevin knew that for the past 3 months, Andreas had been claiming that he and Nadine loved each other and intended to get married once he won her back. While similar situations had occurred before, this time things were different. Nadine was not just with her friend, she was also accompanied by another man. When Andreas noticed this, he instantly became angry, approached Nadine, taking her hand and starting an argument. He attempted to pull her out of the bar, but she resisted. Her 24-year-old friend, Florian Janney, intervened, positioning himself between Andreas and Nadine. He insisted that he was merely a friend and not romantically involved with her, claiming they had only just met. Nonetheless, Andreas was not calmed by this explanation. He was furious that Nadine was spending time with another man and struggled to contain his anger, nearly provoking a fight in the bar. Nadine, Florian, and her brother worked hard to soothe him, prevented Andreas from asserting control over Nadine. After significant effort, they managed to calm him down, though he was still in tears. Feeling overwhelmed, Andreas chose to leave the bar, not wanting to remain in that environment. Kevin stayed behind with Nadine and Florian, worried about their safety. Andreas' outburst was alarming, and now Nadine felt genuinely concerned for her well-being. She didn't want to remain in the bar either, but feared that her ex might be waiting outside. After waiting to ensure Andreas had left, the entire group decided to walk Nadine home. Florian drove her back, even offered to stay the night to help her feel safe. Overwhelmed by fear, Nadine accepted his offer. This choice would prove to have significant consequences. Around 4 a.m., Andreas could no longer contain his jealousy and chose to contact his ex again. When he reached her house, he noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway, which he recognized as Florian's. It became clear that Andreas hadn't gone home after leaving the bar. Instead, he had remained in the parking lot, secretly watching the group. He observed that Florian was with Nadine, while no one else had left the house. This only fueled his anger. Andreas suspected that Nadine was lying and dating someone new. He felt they were enjoying themselves together without a care. He resolved to confront both Nadine and Florian about the situation. Furious, Andreas jumped out of his car and started ringing the doorbell while banging on the front door. Instead of Nadine and her friend, her father, 59-year-old Rupert, answered. He came out to calm Andreas, who was shouting. Rupert insisted it was too late for arguments and asked Andreas to leave until morning, when they could discuss everything calmly. Rupert was aware of the situation involving Florian at the bar, reassured Andreas that Nadine and Florian were just friends. Understanding and approachable, Rupert shared a cigarette with Andreas, invited him to talk outside on the street. They had a conversation on various topics, as Rupert probably hoped this would soothe Andreas and persuade him to leave. Having known each other for several years, Andreas had become a valued member of Nadine's family. Nadine's parents treated him well, which is why Rupert chose not to call the police to remove his daughter's ex-boyfriend. After speaking with Rupert, Andreas seemed to feel less agitated. He got into his car and drove off, while Rupert returned inside to go to bed. However, just a short distance down the road, Andreas began to feel annoyed again. He came back 15 minutes later, knocking on the door and ringing the bell, which disturbed everyone in the house. Nadine and Kevin came out to confront him. Unlike Rupert, they were very upset, wanted to make it clear that Andreas needed to leave. A new argument broke out at the front door. No one was holding back their words. Nadine was determined to completely cut off ties with her bothersome ex and insisted that there should be no further relationship between them. She demanded that he vanish from her life for good. Kevin backed his sister, stating that their friendship was overdue to Andreas's stalking behavior. He was worried about Andreas's unhealthy actions and wanted nothing more to do with him. Meanwhile, Andreas felt betrayed, convinced that Nadine had been unfaithful and that Kevin was protecting her. He now felt abandoned by Kevin, who he believed should have supported him instead. Before leaving, Andreas tried to find out if Nadine had cheated. However, she firmly told him it was not his concern since they hadn't been dating for several months. At that moment, Andreas had a shocking realization. Nadine had actually broken up with him 3 months ago, and all his attempts to win her back were in vain. No one expected him to pursue her anymore. Feeling angry, Andreas decided to go home, choosing to avoid confronting his feelings of hurt. At 5:30 a.m. on October 6, 2018, Andreas returned to his ex's house. He began knocking on the door and ringing the doorbell, but he did not shout. This time, Rupert responded. He was already very irritated because Andreas had kept the whole family awake the previous night. When Rupert opened the door, he intended to angrily chase Andreas away and threaten to call the police, but he was cut off before he could finish. Andreas pulled out a gun, shot him in the head twice, killing him instantly. He then stepped over Rupert's body and entered the house. Nadine's mother, 51-year-old Andrea, rushed outside when she heard the noise. Tragically, she became the next victim. Andreas then attacked Kevin. He went upstairs and attempted to enter Nadine's room, but Nadine and Florian had locked the door. Andreas determined that the quickest way to reach her was through the balcony. He went outside, climbed the bars on the building's facade, broke the window, opened fire on both Nadine and her friend Florian. This horrific event unfolded within just a few minutes, resulting in the deaths of 5 people. After committing the crime, Andreas drove to the Kitzbühel police station. He arrived around 6 a.m. and placed a gun in front of a police officer at the entrance. He confessed to having just shot 5 people. Additionally, he handed over a knife and a baseball bat, which he had used to break into the Hinterholzer home. He used the bat to shatter a window and gain access to Nadine's room. While the knife was never used, it appears he brought it along for safety. The police discovered 5 bodies at the scene, and the details of their deaths confirmed Andreas's account. Each victim had been attacked at close range with multiple bullets. Florian suffered gunshot wounds to his hands as he tried to defend himself. There was nothing missing from the house. The toxicology report indicated that Andreas was sober, with no alcohol or banned substance in his system. He had no prior legal issues. The entire community of Kitzbühel was in shock over the incident. In this close-knit town, crimes, especially such violent ones, were extremely rare. All the neighbors were familiar with the Nadine family, known for their kindness and helpfulness. They had good relationships with everyone in the area. Both the victim's family and the suspect's family were respected in the community. The community especially mourned the loss of Florian Jani, a talented young hockey player and goalkeeper, who was seen as a promising individual. His compassion for Nadine ultimately led to his tragic death. Friends who knew Nadine well later stated that she had no romantic involvement with Florian. They were simply friends who enjoyed good conversations. However, some speculated that Florian stayed the night to protect her, and suggested that they might have already begun dating. Following the tragedy, a small memorial with photographs of the victims was set up in the local church. Over the course of the month it remained there. More than 1,000 heartfelt notes were left by mourners and caring individuals in memory of the victims. Andreas had been in custody in a special cell designed for inmates needing extra supervision. The police considered him at high risk for end one's own life, so they monitored him closely. He spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement and was allowed only 1 hour outside to walk in the yard. When the family of Andreas learned what had happened, they addressed the town's residents, expressed their condolences. They also informed the police that a gun belonging to Andreas's brother was missing. The brother had a permit for the firearm, which he kept at home for self-defense. Unfortunately, Andreas knew how to access it and where the key to the safe was. The gun's serial numbers matched, and Andreas confirmed that he had stolen the gun from the house. At a press conference, Andreas's parents expressed their belief that he should face appropriate consequences for his actions. They mentioned that their son's mental health had declined while he was in prison. Despite widespread public anger, the family attempted to explain Andreas's behavior. His father stated that Andreas had been struggling with depression, particularly following his breakup with Nadine. His mother added that while her son might have had mental health challenges, it is unclear why he and his family never pursued mental health treatment. Andreas faces charges for murdering 5 people with a firearm and for breaking and entering. Andreas's lawyer intends to base their defense on his client's questionable mental state. Andreas claims that after hearing hurtful remarks from Nadine and her brother, who attempted to force him out of the house, he lost touch with reality and was unable to control his actions. He states that the only thought in his mind was his desire to kill the cheater. He described this experience as a state of emotional turmoil. The lawyer hoped this would reduce his client's culpability. However, the prosecution argued that Andreas was merely pretending and insisted that he was aware of his actions, he fit to stand trial. The lawyer disagreed with this assessment. In the end, the court ruled that there were no grounds for reducing Andreas's criminal responsibility. Andreas believed he deserved a fair punishment and did not want to evade responsibility for his crime. From the outset, he intended to confess. He willingly went to the police station and had no plans to take back his confession made the morning after the massacre. His lawyers stressed Andreas's mental state during the case. Assessments revealed that he suffered from a disorder that left him with 2 choices: either walk away and forget or return to kill. There was no middle ground. Once he understood that he could not regain his relationship with Nadine, he became obsessed with the notion that Nadine should not belong to anyone. As soon as the murder trial started, Andreas confessed to the crime. He believed that confessing would make the legal process easier and reduce trauma for the victims' families, as well as for himself. He shared details about his relationship with Nadine, discussing his jealousy and the reasons behind his actions. He described Nadine as an attractive girl who attracted many admirers, which fueled his jealousy. Andreas held traditional views about women and felt that a good woman should behave differently. He couldn't accept Nadine's decision to break up, insisting that she was his property and that she shouldn't date or spend time with other men, even as just friends. On the night of the incident, he was also affected by Kevin's betrayal. Nadine's parents were annoyed with Andreas, and he was afraid of losing her entire family, with whom he felt closer than to his own. He claimed that after the breakup, his family did not provide the support he desperately needed, leading him to lose 10 kilograms. Ultimately, in a moment of rage, Andreas lost control and killed them all. Andreas showed remorse and offered condolences to the families of his victims, but some believed he was merely trying to get a lighter sentence. Prosecution witnesses testified that Nadine continuously told Andreas that their relationship was over. Despite this, he kept asking for another chance, hoping to get back together, and he stalked her without truly grasping the situation. During the hearing, Andreas came across as insecure. He spoke softly, often mumbling to himself, and cried during emotional moments. At times, he seemed to misunderstand the gravity of what happened, viewing it as an accident. The prosecution contended that there was clear evidence of a brutal, premeditated murder involving 5 victims. They argued that Andreas had ample time to think through his actions as he drove to and from his ex-girlfriend's house. When he returned home, he took 3 items: a gun, a knife, and a baseball bat, indicating that he had meticulously planned his actions. The choice to take a knife suggested he intended to ensure there would be no survivors among Nadine's family and her friend Florian. During the hearing, the prosecution pointed out that Andreas had changed his marital status on social media from engaged to widower. Andreas claimed that this change occurred shortly after Nadine's murder, but some friends and acquaintances suggested that Andreas may have done so intentionally beforehand. Just a few months after their breakup, he started reacting more aggressively to Nadine's rejections. He often expressed a desire for her to be dead and sent messages accusing her of dating someone new, voicing a wish to kill that person. At the time, these statements were not taken seriously. The lawyer argued that these were simply emotional responses to rejection, which Andreas struggled to accept. However, this did not necessarily mean he intended to kill her. Nadine's friends mentioned that she had been feeling fearful of her ex lately and had been trying to avoid him as much as she could. She discovered that Andreas had been engaging in violent acts, such as beheading chickens with a machete and torturing cats. His actions appeared to be quite dangerous. During the trial, the defendant struggled to answer many questions, especially regarding why, in addition to Nadine, her friend Florian, brother Kevin, and her parents were killed. The lawyer argued that this showed Andreas lacked control over his actions and didn't fully grasp what was happening. However, the Austrian justice system made a definitive ruling: the murder of 5 people could not be seen as a mitigating factor. The idea that Andreas was insane was dismissed. By the end of the trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean he will be incarcerated for life. In Austria, individuals with life sentences are often released after an average of 21 years. Furthermore, the lawyer vowed to continue advocating for his client's release and planned to file appeals.